What's up, everybody? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Yeah. Nothing like a relaxing weekend, sort of. And coming back and hanging out with all of you. Welcome to everybody listening around the world, all across the United States. This is Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Squeak-free chair, coffee is ground. It's all good in the hood right here in sunny downtown Burbank. Today is Monday, October 6th. We are 277 days into the new year. We are live, as always, from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Gates of Hell, Burbank. Temperature chilled out for about a week, kicked back up. We're right back to the buck 15. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. Oh, feels so good. Love Mondays. Really do. All right. Podcast. Go like, subscribe, follow. Check out the podcast. If you haven't, oh, look at that. Bacon jerky. Oh, no. Have you noticed everywhere you look and turn these days, all you see is bacon? It was just a thing last month. That's all it was. It started on Twitter. And I got to tell you, I don't know if it's this show, if it's the vibe, what the deal is, but I see bacon everywhere now. Commercials. Bacon. All over Facebook. Bacon. Oh, man. All right. Oh, where was I? Oh, man. I'm so looking forward to this show tonight. LA's in the house. LA Marzulli. Rick Shaw. Is it Richard? Is it Rick? I'm going with Rick. Going with Rick. The Watchers series of DVDs, of programs. I think they're going to start a Watchers TV. Be really cool, too. We'll be talking about that tonight. We're going to do LA tonight and also tomorrow night. Tonight we're going to talk about Watchers 6 and 7 and a bunch of other subjects tonight with the two of them. Tomorrow night on John's show, Rome, LA is going to be on again. We're going to continue with Watchers Week, and tomorrow night they're going to be doing Watchers 8. That's the one that Dr. J is in. So it looks like it's LA Marzulli Week right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network. All right. Yeah, the podcast, all updated. And we've got a bunch of other featured shows that are going to be uploaded tomorrow that had to be converted. And so which were all of the cool stuff. Not all of the cool stuff, but a lot of the mainline shows that we had to do from either overseas or shows that were broadcast in another format, in a high-def format, and they had to be converted. And those high-def shows on YouTube, they just happen to be some of the, all the guests are good. I don't want to say the bigger guest, but you know what I'm trying to say. So a lot of those featured shows will be finished and uploaded tomorrow. So go subscribe to the podcast, help support the show, okay? If you haven't been over to jimmychurchradio.com as of late, go check it out. We've cleaned up the site, spent a lot of time on it this weekend. I think it's better. It's smoother. It's fresher. It's fresh. Yeah, go check it out. jimmychurchradio.com. Very proud of what's going on over there. Today, let's get this show cracking. I am ready. I'm looking over here at Twitter, it seems to be the normal on fire. I wanna light it up tonight. I'm in a good mood, so everybody participate. We're gonna have L.A. and Rick in the house tonight. Fire off the questions. Hashtag F2BQ. Of course, follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. And the magic formula is hashtag DMRADIONET. Hashtag DMRadioNet. That's what you want to do. Come hang out in the sandbox. Come hang out. All right. Any questions specifically for me? Oh, did I leave my phone on? Oh, Radio 101. Turn off the phones before the broadcast. I'm doing that now. Okay, it's done. I did that for Rick Sinnott. That's a Harley, which is my text alert is a Harley. Today, Elizabeth Shue is 51 years old. Why would Elizabeth Shue make the cut? Why would she make the cut? She made the cut because of Back to the Future number 2 and number 3. Oh, yeah. And the movie Soap Dish. Soap Dish is beyond excellent. Okay. All right. Elizabeth Shue, 51 years old. Married to Davis Guggenheim. Davis, director here in Hollywood, who I've bumped into many times over the years. And he did that really cool documentary with Jimmy Page and Jack White and The Edge from U2. I forget what it's called. Louder, Extremely Loud and Hazardous or whatever. Great documentary. Anyway, that's her husband, Davis. And they live in Venice Beach. But Davis is a talented filmmaker and one that I'm very jealous that he did that documentary because that documentary was done correctly. All right, let's go. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Let's crank through all of this. Everything's Fade to Black. J Church Radio. Go follow, like, subscribe. Go do your thing. Later tonight, we will have open lines with L.A. and Rick. Okay, the call-in number is 323-825-5045. Came off of a really amazing week last week on this program. This week, absolutely, I don't know how we managed to put all of this together. Somebody had this question has come up now a few times, no, more than a few times, a couple of dozen times over the last week, and the question is, Jimmy, what's your favorite interview? And it's coming from so many different sources and email and Facebook and Twitter that I guess we have so many really cool shows behind us now that we can actually ask that question. And everybody wants an answer. I don't know what to even say to that. I don't want to slight anybody because every show in its own right is excellent. It really is. But today, I got a couple of emails, and then it was posted again a couple of times on Facebook, and they're not from the same people. You know, so I thought about it. Now, not taking anything away from Ike or Wilcock or Friedman or Dolan or Cremo or Linda Moulton Howe or Van Doniken, I don't know. Stephen Greer, Stephen Bassett, Travis Walton. It's just all of those great shows. But two stick out for me. Two. And they're all great. They really are. They're all great. They're all fun. But two. Jim Mars. I get it. Yes, exactly. I'm not taking away from any of those. But two stand out for me. You ready? I'm going to answer the question now. Let's put this to bed for now. Is Jay Widener, Falconelli, and Bob Schroeder. Now, before you go, what? That's right. Those are the two, not James Swagger. I'm kidding. Swagger's listening. All of those A-listers, like Swagger and Friedman, all of those guys, those are all great shows. They're really good. But for me, the two shows that freaked me out, and Swagger, I'm telling you right now, I know you're listening. Swagger, go get Jay Widener on your show. And you will, for the rest of your life, say that Jay Widener show was the best show I ever did. Jay Widener and Falconelli was an eye-opener for all of us. That was just absolutely amazing. And then Bob Schroeder with his whole propulsion system of E.T. Craft and his proposal with that was unbelievable. Yeah, Clifford Stone. I get it. I understand. I get it. I do. I really do. But since you're asking, Jay Widener melted my brain, and Bob Schroeder, I think, should be one of the first names that is brought up when it comes to science and technology and the ET presence. I predict big things in Bob Schroeder's future. Same thing with Widener, although Widener has got a great career. But I'm saying those two shows. Okay, all right, man. Wow, way too much on that. Okay, before we get to this break, I'm gonna say this one time only. You Fadernauts blow my mind. Okay? Thank you. The new Fadernauts, for the lack of a better word or an easier word for me as the host to say, Faders.org is the new Fadernaut website that you guys put together. I don't want to call it a fan site. It's not about that. I can't say those words. I'm uncomfortable with it. But the site is amazing. www.faders.org. Go check it out. And if you are worthy, they do a background check. If you are worthy, become a member. It's really cool. Faders.org. One of the things about the site, now I went today, and I don't know when it officially launched, but I'm going to say today, is one of the cool things about it is there's a page called FAR, F-A-R-R, Fadernauts Anomaly Reporting and Research. It's totally interactive, got a map. You got something you need to report, you had a sighting, you can go do it there. The site is completely interactive, and it's made and built with love from Fadernauts. It is humbling, and that's it. Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I going around that page today and looking, it's a lot better than our website, that's for sure. A lot of care and love has been put into that site. It is stunning. Stunning. Thank you. It is, again, humbling. It's just humbling. I hate that word humbling. I can't say it anymore. Okay. Faders.org. Go check it out. Tomorrow, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, I will be on with Carrie Cassidy on the Camelot live stream channel, which is livestream.com/Project Camelot Live. Okay, we posted that today over on Facebook. It's in a couple of locations. I think it was tweeted out. We'll do it again. We'll tweet it out. We'll get it out there. But tomorrow, 12 noon, Project Camelot live stream, their channel, Carrie Cassidy. It's going to be great, and I love it when I'm on the other side of the fence. Tonight, it's L.A. Marzulli, Rick Shaw of the Watchers series. I think we're going to give away some DVDs. They don't have a choice in that, so they better be prepared. And tomorrow, we have Thomas Reed and the Reed family UFO case. And Wednesday, Scott Wolter, star of America Unearthed. All right? Now, don't forget, we do have a column. It's called hashtag F2 number 2 BQ. Got any questions? You got anything you want to do? Want to shoot it straight to me for LA tonight and Rick? You can do it there. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. This is Fade to Black. We're back. It is Monday. Setting up for another just amazing week right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'll be back right after this. Shoot me an email right now, jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, you have tuned into the latest phenomenon in late-night talk radio, Fade to Black, starring the inimitable Jimmy Church, showcasing his continuing quest in pursuit of knowledge of the strange and paranormal. Sit back, open your mind, and let's get cracking.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I gotta tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444, or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com
On the Dark Matter Radio
Yeah. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Lou Sheehan just tweeted, your favorite interview was when I interviewed you. Lou, that was an epic moment in Fade to Black history. I'm so with you. And when you're ready to go again, let me know. Eugene just tweeted, you should name your least favorite interviews. I don't have one. They're all good. I mean that. Even you know, the forget about Doofus from last week or 2 weeks ago, but even the other two that were a little bit dicey and a little shady, it's called Exposed. You know what I mean? You know, those were good too. True Colors were exposed, and I think those are great. Great interviews. Yeah, they're all good. Everything is on this show. We've been really lucky. All right, emails. Let's get to a couple really quick. This came in from John. Now, I've got to, Keith, I know you're listening. I need you to forward me this email. I meant to speak to you about this today. He says, John, we sent today a reanalysis of the rate of precession based on an alternative hypothesis to the one suggested. There is, in fact, a vast amount of data that precession idea is probably at least okay, if not entirely correct. Your own ideas may or may not also be involved. That is, it could be two partial reasons for the shift of precession. The email should be available to the dark matter emails, but check the Art Bell site. Okay? So I didn't receive the real email. I received the commented on email. So Keith, forward that email to me, and we'll get to the bottom of that. Very interesting. That's from John. This email from Ben Miller. I would like to recommend William Forstchen for a guest on the show. He wrote a fiction book called 1 Second After, in which he describes what happens when an EMP strikes and destroys the electrical system and the electronics we all depend on. He also wrote Pillar in the Sky, which describes the building of a space elevator, which will revolutionize our world. The consequences of an EMP are chilling. That's from Ben Miller. Couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. Always keep the guest requests coming. There's a reason why this show is bespoke. I'm serious. Keep the guest request coming. We do get 10, 20 requests a day. Okay. And we are booked out way in advance because of that. And it allows that. And also, lately, it's been really cool, too, the guests coming to us wanting to get on the show. And you got to love that. Tonight, the whole reason why I've always wanted L.A. on the show. And we went to go see Grant Cameron speak a couple of weeks ago. And so we get there, and it's all good. It's warm. It's fuzzy. And I go and I sit. And sitting next to me was Rick Shaw. And it's called Synchronicity. And Rick had his Watchers, a couple of Watchers DVDs with him. And they were sitting on the chair next to me. And I picked them up, and I made a comment. And offhanded, stupid Jimmy Church comment about, hey, are these mine? And then they had a drawing later on, and I actually won the Watchers DVDs, which we'll be giving away on the show tonight. So I go back, and Rick, after I won them, and I had announced to Yvonne that I'll give these away on the show. Thank you very much. I didn't want to take them, but anyway, it's a long story. So I went back and sat next to Rick, and Rick's like, see, man, you were meant to have those. And Rick and I sat and chatted, and it's called Synchronicity. So it was an opportunity for Rick and I to formally get introduced and get them on the show. So I bumped somebody. Tonight. I'm so excited about getting LA on the show. Years ago, I remember when I first discovered LA, and not Los Angeles, LA, Marzulli. And I just researched and read everything that he had. And I thought, man, this is my kind of guy. This is my kind of guy. He presents well, he speaks well, and he digs deep, and he does real research, gets off the couch. This is my kind of guy. And I waited and waited. Tonight, he's on the show. And Rick and him and the way that they do, if you haven't seen The Watchers, if you haven't seen the series, you need to go peep it out. We will give away some DVDs tonight. I don't know if they have anything available online. I don't know. You can certainly purchase them, but that's not the point. When you watch and see what they do and how they do it, these are when you watch documentaries, I have a certain standard when I watch a documentary, and I get my documentary fix from The Watchers. They're done right. If I was going to do a documentary, it would be like The Watchers. So it's very, very, very cool stuff. Okay. Couple of headlines that are really, really, really trippy right now. I could sit here and talk about Ebola all night. I'm not going to. I'll let the mass media out there just put the fear in everybody. So we'll let that go. Except for the Dallas Ebola patient is now on an experimental drug. And have you noticed how ISIS has been given a mass media break over the last few days? A few other stories out there have risen. One of them that I find crazy, nutty, is North Korea's Kim Jong-un has gone missing. Over the last couple of days, the heads, numbers 2 and 3 in North Korea, did a sneak attack, called up Seoul, South Korea, said, hey, we want to jump across the border, want to come hang out for a day. And they did, with no Kim Jong-un. He's missing. Some say he's fled the country. I don't know where he would fled to. China, maybe. But it's a crazy story. Could the regime be on the brink of failing? You can only ride that so long before, but hunger and just everything that's going on in that country. But also, the old regime was based on a fictitious story, gods and lions and mountaintops and so forth. But Kim Jong-un, he's the end of the line. And the regime, anybody else that steps up, because they're getting old. So anybody that would step up would have to be exposed to the big lie. So maybe they're making a change. Maybe they just want to go straight. They want to go legit. They want to get rid of the crack house and get some real jobs. Also, today, this story is all over the net. All over the net. Renee sent me a bunch of links today. I started reading about it, and a massive explosion has been reported at one of Iran's suspected nuclear sites. Oh, yes. The explosion is real. At least 2 people have been killed in an explosion of fire at the Iranian munitions factory. And the Iranian state news agency, IRNA, reported on Monday, today, that a factory belonging to the Defense Industries Organization suffered a fire on Sunday night. And now, what's crazy about the story is you need something to detonate a nuclear bomb. And that's what gets tested at this facility. And they're not supposed to be doing this, right? Remember? All the sanctions were lifted, a majority of them, and they came clean with their nuclear testing, production. And then this happens. Either you are or you are not. And just like I say to my kids all the time, eventually you're going to get busted. You're going to get caught. You can't keep everything a secret forever. And now their hand is in the cookie jar. I'm speaking about Iran specifically. Boom. Boom. Oh, I just saw this on Twitter. Boom, boom, boom. Yes. And that's exactly what has just happened in Iran. And what kind of excuse are you going to have for something like this? Too funny. All right. You know what? I'm at the bottom of the hour. You guys ready? You guys ready to get this cracking? I am. Let's do this. I'm excited. L.A. Marzulli, Rick Shaw in the house. Tomorrow night, Thomas Reed. Wednesday night, Scott Wolter, America Unearthed. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's get this one cracking, everybody. You know what this music means. 2 minutes. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Are you afraid of the dark? Don't move. Don't touch that mouse. You are listening to Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark matter.
Dark matter, dark matter, dark matter, dark matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me get all this lined up. This is Fade to Black only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. All right, hold on. Everybody just hang tight for a second. Let's just get everybody going here. Boom, done. Okay. All right. Fade to Black only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your humble host, Jimmy Church. Been excited about getting these two guys on the show for a while now. And L.A., of course, been a big fan for years, and I'm totally excited. L.A. Marzulli is an author, lecturer, filmmaker. He has penned 8 books, including the Nephilim trilogy, which made the CBA bestsellers list. He received an honorary doctorate for the series from his mentor, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas, who was the provost at Pacific International University. His new series, On the Trail of the Nephilim, is a full-color, oversized book which uncovers the startling evidence that there has been a massive cover-up on what he believes are the remains of the Nephilim, the giants mentioned in the Bible. He is now working on Volume 2 in the series, which promises to have an even more incredible and revealing photographs and interviews. L.A. then teamed up with film producer Richard Shaw to create the Watchers series, which are now 8 installments deep, and Watcher 7, the UFO Physical Evidence, recently won UFO Best Film and People's Choice Awards at the UFO Congress in 2014. Marzulli and Shaw took their second trip to Peru in January of 2014, filming ancient artifacts and megalithic structures at various locations, which will be revealed in Watchers 8. It's already been revealed. Watchers 8 is out. Marzulli is a frank supernaturalist who has lectured on the subjects of UFOs, the Nephilim, ancient prophetic texts, presenting his exhaustive research at conferences and churches, as well as appearances and interviews on numerous national and international radio and television programs, now including this one. I would like to humbly welcome to the program L.A. Marzulli and Mr. Rick Shaw. How are you guys tonight?
Great to be here.
Great to be here, Jimmy.
First off, I'm just going to start things off here, which is, and I kind of mentioned this earlier in the program. You guys actually get out of the couch, get out of the house, get off the chairs, and go and do something. And I think that is something very, very important. The Watchers is not, I don't want to say it in such a cavalier way, but it's not, because other guys do decent documentaries with cut and paste and may not ever leave the house, and they do a lot of research. I get that. But you guys actually do something. And do you hear that often? Is that a comment that, are people thankful for? Because I think it needs to really be driven home.
Rick?
Rick.
No, it's true. Thank you, Jimmy, for those kind words. I really appreciate it. We do get off our butts and go out there and drag ourselves through all kinds of situations. And we don't just sit at home. It's something we just don't do. I just got back from Israel working on the Torah Code film, and we put ourselves within 200 meters of the border with Hamas. So, we're out there actually doing stuff, and it's been a joy working with L.A. He's just a lot of fun to do these things with.
Well, one of the points I will drive home when you and I were hanging out, Rick, a couple of weeks ago. Under you, I mean, you have with you a piece of a Hamas rocket, right? You just walk up to L.A. Have you seen this piece of the rocket?
Yeah, I have. It's amazing.
Amazing. He comes up to me. He's like, Jimmy, so check this. Do you know what this is? And I'm looking. I'm like, something from a 57 Chevy? I don't know. What is it?
It's a Buick Tailwind.
Yeah, right. And he goes, no, man, this is a piece of a Hamas rocket. I just got back from Israel. And I held that thing in my hands just in awe, not so much about what it was, but you were there. Yeah. And that needs to be driven home. I mean, that's just absolutely amazing to me that I was able to hold that in my hands.
I stood with Dan Gordon, who's a reservist in the IDF and also was a screenplay writer. Great guy, good friend of mine. Has done many motion pictures. He did Passenger 57, Murder in the First, on and on. And he took me to this police station on the border of Gaza, and they just had piles of Hamas rockets laying there, piles of them. He said there have been 17,000 rockets shot at Israel since the year 2000.
Insane. And the same thing was...
Hardly anybody knows that.
And for you, L.A., when I was watching Watchers 6, which was, I'm serious, I'm so jealous because it's that kind of documentary that I need. When I need a documentary fix, and I'm not kidding about this, I'm not saying this in jest, I want to see some guys really presenting something. And you guys go down to Peru, you're handling all of those elongated skulls. You guys are there amongst the rocks and the megalithic sculptures and walls. And it's like it's the real deal. And for you, what was it like? Because I know that you've been researching those skulls for a long time. What was it like to put your mitts on those and to handle those in person?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us on the show. Really appreciate it. But when Rick and I were down there in Paracas, Peru, and we walked into Senior Juan's museum, it's like all of a sudden we're there. And it's like, On the Trail of a Nephilim is an oversized book. It's like 8.5 by 11. So the pictures are really big. And we can read about stuff, but there's nothing like actually being in a place, feeling the Paracas breeze coming in off the ocean,
right.
Feeling the warmth of the sun, getting the smell of a locale, just the local people. And then I'm standing in the museum in front of this display case, and there's like 40 elongated skulls in there. Now, some of them are cradle headboard, but many of them are not, in our opinion. And it's just like, we're here. We're here. And then Brian Forrester took us out to the Chongos Necropolis, which was just unbelievable. I've been back there about 4 or 5 times now. I've walked pretty much the whole thing. There's a couple of areas I've yet to go to. There's a pyramid way, way, way in the distance. I haven't been to that one yet. But I've been all around the lower part of Chongos, up in the dunes and down and in the what we think is the remains of a village. There's still stones in the sand. And the Wakaros, the grave robbers, are continually ransack the place. And
it's on private property, right?
Well, some of it is and some of it isn't. The pig farm is private property, which borders up against the reserve or the reservation, which is owned by the Peruvian government. We are in the process of attempting to get the proper archaeological permits to do a dig in the Chongos Necropolis. We feel no one's really done any research there since 1928. And we know that stuff is coming out of there all the time. And I'm not making this up. The last time I was there, I was with Brian Forrester, David Greenhill, a Peruvian archaeologist, a Peruvian Wakaro, an ex-grave robber, and Senior Juan Navarro, the curator of the Peruvian or the Paracas History Museum.
And the pilot, what was his name?
The pilot.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah. I'm drawing a blank here.
I'm drawing a blank too. Okay, moving on.
But we were walking in the Chongos Necropolis.
Wait, are you talking about the pilot that flew us over the Nazca lines?
No, it's a whole different
No, that's a whole nother crew. I'll get back to that. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So we're in Chongos, and we spent 2 or 3 hours combing the place. We walked up and down these dunes in the middle of it's just so bleak and stark, this area. And we'd pretty much finished the exploration, didn't really see anything extraordinary. And, you were not allowed to dig there, obvious, for the reasons of the the Peruvian government will come and arrest you. So you're not allowed to dig, but we can walk through it, which is what we did. So we're walking out of the Chongos necropolis, and I look over, and there's like something in the distance, and I kind of go, wow, that looks like a skull. But it's like, what's it doing there? It's just kind of lying in between two tire tracks. It's like, what? And I'm saying to myself, maybe it's just a Clorox bottle. So we're getting closer, and I'm going, that's a skull. And now we run up to the thing, and Brian Forrester takes one look at it and immediately runs up the hill. And we get there, and sure enough, it's an elongated skull. About 30 seconds later, Brian goes, guys, get up here. We run up the hill holding the skull, and there's a recent grave which has just been opened up, and he found 2 other skulls for a total of 3. They are all elongated, and the Ricaros, the grave robbers, got spooked about something.
Right.
And they just abandoned it and left everything there. So that was, and we took the skulls immediately. We were the Peruvian archaeologists, and we took them, and now they're registered at Senior Juan's Museum. So that's, it's hands-on, it's there. Over the last week, I was back at an undisclosed location in a state in the Midwest on an open archaeological dig, and the archaeologist who was in charge of it, it was just the 2 of us. And we spent half of one day and a whole day of the next day doing a dig, and he's been on this dig for like 8 years. And I told him, I said, here we are, we're picking little bits of flint and bone, very small pieces of bone. I found a few pot shards, and lots of charcoal, and that's it. A couple of days later, after I left, he found some arrowheads. I said, when you're in Chongos and you look down at your feet, there's broken bits of pottery everywhere. You can find things like, oh, here's a Wari slingshot that's 1,000 years old.
Right.
Oh, here's the lower jawbone or a mandible of, who knows what. Richard and I were there last time. We're walking through the necropolis, and Richard comes up, and we had found 3 different skulls, one of which, and I got a great shot of Rick holding the skull, and it's just laying there in the sand.
In the sand, and I want to.
It's ironic. I was just going to say, it's ironic that all these skulls are laying on the surface, and the only reason that they are is because of the Huaqueros. They go in and dig these graves up looking for
things of
that
value.
they can sell.
Right,
pieces of copper, gold, pottery, anything like that. And sometimes they actually find some stuff that's in perfect shape and still intact after 2,000 years, and they sell it for quite a bit of money, and they just toss the skulls on the ground. They don't care about them.
There's a scene in Watcher 6 that I want to paint the picture for our audience here. You guys are walking across. I'm assuming that Rick is the cameraman, okay? But L.A. and Brian are walking across the sand, literally tripping over bones. And you have to, and it seems to go to the horizon. And when Brian turns and he goes, oh man, it goes all the way over to there, and it goes all the way over. What? I've never found a femur lying in my backyard. I've never experienced what that would be like, finding human remains like that. But how did it affect you? Because it literally, you guys are tripping over skeletons. What was that like?
Well, for me, it was very sobering and a very somber moment.
Right.
Brian did not say anything about where we were going when he took us there. He just said, we're going to Chongos, and it's a tomb. A lot of tombs here have been plundered since Columbus got there. So for 500 years, basically, the place has been plundered. Okay, we get that. But it doesn't prepare you for what you're about to see. And I remember walking up to the pyramid, and let me give you the backstory. There's a green belt. There's an underground river that flows down from the Andes, and everything is very green and lush, and there's lots of little acres or 2 acres or 5 acre parcels all planted, and potatoes and corn and beans, and there's cattle moving in, and sheep and goats and herders and peasants, and it's just a whole scene. And it's like going back in time, and you step off the green belt, literally, and you're in the desert, and it's bleak and it's stark, and it's nothing but sand as far as you can see. And I've never been in a place like that. And we started walking towards the remains of an Inca adobe pyramid. And as we got there, and I'm by myself at this point, Brian is where everybody's kind of off on their own. And I look down at my feet and I go, what's all these red things? And I bend down and I realize that these red things are in fact pottery shards. And the white things that are next to them are bone fragments. And at that point, it was like, you have got to be kidding.
Right.
And like you say, as we started exploring the necropolis, I realized that I'm walking, everywhere I walk, I'm walking on somebody's uncle, somebody's mom, somebody's dad, somebody's child. And it's disturbing.
Yeah, the look on your face, LA, the look on your face, and when Brian started to disclose really where you guys were standing and what the reality of it was, you were in shock, and you could see. I could not imagine. And plus, you're a very religious guy, LA, and so that sombering. I can't imagine when it's miles and miles of bones, and I don't want to play this down. It's just an amazing part of Watcher 6. I mean, you just have to stop and take pause and realize where you guys are at and what you guys are seeing. You're right there.
That graveyard is 7 miles wide, and that's the way it is there. I mean, it's just everywhere.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Hey, LA, one of the things that is very impressive with you is you speak to both sides of the fence. I've seen many presentations that you have done in front of churches, and then the other side where you're in a ufology crowd, and you're accepted into both, and you manage to get the combination of both camps together and to meet in the middle. How do you fight that battle? Because you do. and when did you start to mesh the two together?
Well, I really come out of what you would call the New Age. I had a guru in my 20s, Guru Maharaji. My third eye was opened. I had meditation techniques which were taught. I experimented with psilocybin, mescaline, LSD, all that stuff. And this is in the 60s. This is like 40 some odd years ago.
Right.
I'm 63 years old, and this is the Beatles, and everyone's experimenting with this stuff, or a lot of people are experimenting. And for me, it was always to try to find out if there was a God, how could we possibly know him? And that's why when the guru came, I got the meditation techniques, and I went, oh my gosh, this is it. And it was definitely an experience. But after 3 years and getting into the inner circle, I realized how corrupt things were. And there was a lot of impropriety going on in sexual natures within the leadership, and just all sorts of stuff, just really weird stuff going on.
It wasn't what it was presented. It wasn't what you thought.
Is.
Right.
Never is. And so, I became an agnostic. I left when I was about 24, 25, and became an agnostic for 6 years. And I remember sitting in my room all alone, reading these Taylor Caldwell books. And then I got to a book by Dave Hunt, which is called The Cold Explosion, I believe. And at the end of that, it's a little prayer to ask Yeshua into your heart. And at this point, I'm all alone in my room. There's nobody around. There's nobody on TV yelling at me, asking for money. It's just me. And I just said, look, I don't know if you're real or not, because I was raised Catholic. I said, I don't know whether you're real or not, but if you are, come into my life and change it. And nothing happened. And about a month later, everything happened. And that's 34 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
34 years ago. My life has never been the same. And having been on both sides of the fence the problem is, let me just cut to the chase, Jimmy. People equate Jesus or Yeshua, his real name, with the nonsense they see on the TV or the junk that they see in a lot of the churches. And there's a lot of, or let's say the youth group, where the youth minister is messing around with your 13-year-old daughter. All sorts of impropriety in the church. stuff with money. Just turn on a lot of the religious broadcasting and watch these people ask you for your $1,000 seed faith offering, and on and on it goes. And it's like when I became spirit filled, which is 34 years ago, I remember turning on the TV and seeing these shows and going, but this isn't the Jesus I know. What is this? Why is this even here? And so I think, it's not about buildings and stained glass windows and funny haircuts and robes and rosaries and candles and stained glass and all this nonsense and popes and priests. All that's the invention of men. What happened 2,000 years ago was people actually had an experience, and that experience is available, and that's what happened today, and that's what happened to me 34 years ago. And that's changed my life. It continues to change my life. So I'm able to go, having been, let's say, in the New Age column and gone to the second heaven and spirit guides and Carlos Castaneda dream quests and all that nonsense. Been there, done that. And all of a sudden, when I got connected 34 years ago, the disparity between that experience and every other experience was, I've already used the word, was, disparate, was a disparity, a huge difference, a chasm between the two.
I'm looking here on Twitter. This question just came in. They're flying by. I'm going to grab this one real quick. It says, on LA site, you have a book about Psalm 83, nuke problem in Iran. So with your news about that, you heard about what's going on in Iran. They just had a little accident. What do you think? Yeah, an explosion. Oh. It's funny. It's downplayed. I'm sure it's a lot worse than what it is. What do you think about that?
Well, there are ancient prophetic texts, which are thousands of years old. And what's interesting, it's not like Nostradamus where the hit factor, let's say, is 80%. Well, he's 80% right. First of all, Nostradamus is about 60% right, and I'm being generous here.
Right.
Edgar Cayce is more than actually less than that. And what we get is these ancient prophetic texts with 100% accuracy. They're thousands of years old. Some of them are as old as 3,000 years old. The Psalm 83, which is what your Twitter friend is referencing there, talks about a group of nations which go up against Israel. And there's a whole series of prophecies that actually are around Israel. The first, one of the most major ones, is the idea that Israel in the latter days, in the end times, would be regathered from the four corners of the earth and reestablished in her ancient homeland, which of course happened in 1949, when Israel becomes a nation in a day. The United Nations vote, and bam, Israel becomes a nation, and she's immediately attacked by her Arab neighbors, and the rest is history. And here we are today in 2014, and exactly the same thing is happening. But this sets the prophetic time clock ticking. And the Psalm 83 war, I believe we're actually looking at the nascent beginnings of that. Let me elaborate here real quickly.
Yeah, please.
Richard just talked about Hamas and the war with Hamas. When we look at Hamas's charter, first of all, in their charter, they call for the complete and utter annihilation and destruction of the Israeli state. So Hamas poses an existential threat to the nation of Israel. Hezbollah in the north, basically their charter says exactly the same thing. Hezbollah now has at least 100,000 rockets. I'm being conservative. Some people place that at more like 150,000 rockets. Many of these have been upgraded, so they're not the Katyusha firecrackers, which are wildly inaccurate. They've been upgraded, and Hamas is, again, trenching in. Now we've got ISIL on the east. The only buffer that Israel has is Jordan, and unless the Jordanian king grows a pair and starts to do something, I predict that Jordan will fall very quickly.
Wow.
Very quickly, because ISIL's going after the whole thing. And their name is ISIL. It's not IS. It's ISIL. That's what they started out with. You can change it and tap dance around it all you want. That name stands for Islamic State of Iraq, Syria, Iraq, Syria, and the Levant. ISIL. That's what originally it was. And the Levant, of course, includes Israel. And Israel's well aware of this. So Israel is surrounded by those who pose an existential threat. If we factor Iran in there, I've just upped the ante. But back Iran off, because that's a separate deal. All those nations I just mentioned are Arab. The Iranians are not. The Iranians are not Arabs. But the other ones are, Hezbollah, Hamas, and ISIL. And I think that this is setting up the Psalm 83 war. Israel will have no other choice but to really cut the heads off the snakes of Hezbollah, Hamas, and ISIL. And when it does, it will expand its territory, just like the Psalm 83 war tells us it will. That's what's coming. They can't live like this. They can't live with Hezbollah lobbing rockets over at will and Hamas doing the same thing. They have got to go in and clean house. It's the only. Richard was just over there. He can tell you. These people do not want peace. They want the destruction of Israel, period.
Well, I stood on Highway 232, which is right next to a kibbutz, about 2 miles from the Gaza Strip, and they had cement barricades up in a field where they were growing wheat, or were, and it was to keep Hamas from sending rockets over into the kibbutz across the street, because a couple years earlier they had targeted a school bus on Highway 232 and killed a child using an anti-tank missile.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hamas is targeting kindergartens, buses, anything that they can get to really strike terror. In fact, some of the tunnels that they had planned were actually coming up in under an eating area in one of the kibbutz on the Israel side of the border, where they were going to try to do a sneak attack. The tunnel was full of drugs to drug people. They had plastic handcuffs, and they were going to take hostages and drug them and pull them back into the tunnel. That's what Israel's dealing with. So there's a whole story that's going to be in the Torah Code film about that. But I mean, that's really what's going on over there. And meanwhile, the people of Israel, when you actually go there and meet these people and listen to their stories, are the kindest people on earth. Oh, are you hungry? Come in. We're making pizza. I mean, that's the kind of thing it is. No one acts like anything has happened, even though every few feet there they have these little bomb shelters that
Right.
if there's an air raid siren, you can run and jump into one of those. Each one of them holds about 15 people, and they're hardened concrete. And then they have a kindergarten room that is hardened. It's an anti-missile area because those buildings have been targeted by Hamas.
As a parent, I just can't fathom that. With my kid, I just can't imagine. One thing I wanted to point out with everybody, I've held that piece of the Hamas rocket in my own two hands. And one of the things that struck me, and I'm sure, L.A., you have the same comment, was this is handmade, machined, like with care. It is an amazing piece of machinery. The way the screws are set, you can tell that somebody somewhere is making this stuff with bad intentions. It is well made, well crafted, with bad intentions.
That particular one you saw, Jimmy, is not the average Hamas rocket. Most of them are much more primitive than that. That one probably came from Syria or Iran. And the other ones are made out of pipe, irrigation pipe, which coincidentally Israel donated to the Palestinians to irrigate their crops. And Hamas has instead taken that pipe and threaded it and made it into rockets. And I've got pieces of a couple of those too.
Right.
Where you can really see the difference.
I mean, it's just scary. It just doesn't look slapped together, is what I'm saying. This is some serious technology.
Some of them, the one that you saw was the base of a nose cone, and the nose cone has like a little counterweight in it that wiggles. So when it's flying, it helps stabilize it in flight. And that's just a piece of it. And the nose cone's kind of a long black plastic part that snaps onto it, and those screws actually bolt it on.
Hey, L.A., is it Nephilim or Nephilim?
Well, there's a bunch of different pronunciations.
Yeah.
My mentor, Dr. I.D. Thomas, would pronounce it Nephilim. Nephilim. That's how he would pronounce it. I didn't know that pronunciation. I pronounced it Nephilim. And a lot of other people pronounce it Nephilim, Nephilim. I guess that's about it.
So
Nephilim.
So I say Nephilim, and
Yeah, I do too.
Okay, so Nephilim. Okay,
Some people pronounce it Nephilim.
yes, I've heard so many different versions, and I just don't want to sound like a doofus. So Nephilim is comfortable for me. So can we go with that?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. I think I'm starting to feel today, not only, and you guys bring this up in Watcher 6, or is it 7? I think it's 7 when you guys talk about
7's the UFO piece.
Yeah, the Vatican. And so, do you feel? Because I feel this, and I talk to a lot of researchers that could Jesus have been misrepresented? You know, could Jesus have been an ET? And not only that, angels in general. I mean, everything seems to come from the sky and come down.
Well, in the classic sense, yes. And I know I'm gonna get flack on this, but wait a minute, what are you talking about?
Yeah, me too. I'm trying to tiptoe through this.
Well, I mean, it's true. An angelic being is, in the classic sense, an extraterrestrial. They're not from here. Therefore, they are, by definition, an extraterrestrial. But it's not the way people think. They're not ET in the sense of coming from Zeta Reticuli. They're interdimensional. One of the fathers of ufology, discusses this and talks about this. The idea that these are actual interdimensional beings. Jacques Vallée, for instance, in his book Messengers of Deception, says, I don't think they're really from some other planet. They appear to be interdimensional. That's what we believe that they are. They're interdimensional. When Yeshua incarnated here, see, here's the deal. People go, well, Jesus must be an ET because he could do this, 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 and this. There's so many prophecies that talk about the first coming. There's a gazillion prophecies talking about the second coming. But all this is like, it's literally, what people don't understand is we're in the midst of this cosmic war that has been raging in an unseen dimension, literally for millennia, and from time to time spills out on this planet and does so in very graphic, dramatic ways. And this heavenly war is between these two different sides. And the bad guys are incredibly nefarious and highly malevolent. They are wicked, literally. The good guys show up too. And we see all this stuff beginning to manifest in ways that I've never seen it. The whole ET thing falls. Let me back up here real quick. When we look at Darwinism, Darwinism tells us that everything just happened by chance. All this, there is no supernatural. There's nothing it's all random. Life really has no meaning other than to reproduce and continue the species. That's it. And even that has really no meaning. All this stuff and reductionism, love, emotions, all this are just combinations of chemicals. Well, I counter that with saying, well, that's interesting, but then tell yourself that you really don't love your wife tonight.
Right.
Tell yourself that. I mean, the whole argument just falls on its own weight.
Right.
But I digress. The bottom line is this: Darwinism sets up an intellectual vacuum. Where did we come from? Where were we created? When Ben Stein in his movie Expelled, which is, if you haven't seen it, rent it. Ben Stein sits down with one of the premier evolutionists of the 20th, 21st century, Richard Dawkins, and asks him a very simple question. Where did the first self-replicating molecule come from?
Exactly.
And Dawkins has no answer.
He doesn't. That's a great, as far as documentary goes, that moment there
is very telling.
Very telling.
And Dawkins is very upset by that, and you can see his body language. Well, I told you no.
He's totally
very
stop the cameras. Yes.
He's ticked off.
Yes.
And so Stein throws him a lifeline. Well, how do you think it could have happened? And this is what he believes. This is his core values coming out in a moment. This is pure honesty. And I'm sorry for the guy. This is all he's got. Well, it could have happened in this way. I quote, maybe in another place in the galaxy, a race of beings who had to evolve to a very high state by some sort of Darwinian process, created us in a lab, and then, fired us through the universe, panspermia. We landed on this planet, which was suitable for life, and presto changeo, here we are. That's all he's got. That's all he's got. which is basically circular reasoning because, well, where did they come from? And when we contrast that with what the biblical narrative says, that all things were created through Yeshua, he spoke everything into existence. And that, so it's like, okay, well, you say, well, you got to have faith to believe that. Okay, fine. But you got to have the same amount of faith, in fact, even more so, to believe what Dawkins is selling, because he's just making it up as he goes along. And what we've got in the biblical narrative is thousands of prophecies which talk about the first advent of Messiah coming to set everything straight. And that's what happens. Everywhere he walks when he's here, everything he does is just amazing. You can't argue with that. You can argue about the church all you want, but you can't argue about him and what he does. Everybody gets healed. You know, the works of the fallen one, the wicked one, people who are demon-possessed become set free.
Right.
People that are born blind. You say, well, the people are just writing that down. Well, the same stuff is happening in China and in other places. And we've experienced it in Watchers, and we actually talk about it in Watchers 8. We've experienced some of that warfare. And so we know it's real. I mean, look, I'm not making this up. We experienced it, and we documented it in Watchers 8. What happened there was absolutely unprecedented. It was unbelievable. And we can get into that if you want to.
Well, tomorrow
also,
night.
if I can add to that discussion a bit, Jimmy.
Yes.
When you're talking about is Jesus an ET, what's getting back to your original question, I mean, I think that because of the knowledge that we've been getting by talking to people who've been abducted, we know that the phenomena is real. Yep. People aren't making this stuff up. They have, a lot of them have implants. You get x-rays and you can see that they've had something inserted into the center of their brain, into their various, their wrists, their toes, their ankles. I mean, these things are physical objects that are actually there, but it also tends to peel the veil back a little bit when you talk about a virgin birth experience, that I believe it's possible, and I'm not trying to be blasphemous here, but just to try to understand what actually was going on with the birth of Christ. Not that he was birthed by an ET, but that we know now that there is something going on as far as the breeding program that Dr. David Jacobs relates in Watchers 7, that where people are being taken and implanted and end up getting pregnant from that. And, we don't know exactly how it happened. The scriptures really don't elaborate on it. But there are other references in the Tanakh, in the book of Daniel and in the book of Ezekiel, where it talks about what sure looks to me like they're trying to describe some kind of craft.
Well, let's back up for a second. And I it's not really what the show is about. I don't really talk about religion, but let's clear up Jimmy's mind on a couple of things. and LA is one of the most read guys when it comes to the scripture, and I see him speak. I can't imagine getting up and speaking to a church, because you got to have your ducks in a row. You got to know what you're talking about. So let me back up. The one thing that when it comes to Jesus himself, is one of the I'm not comfortable with is we don't have any from the period, anything that speaks about Jesus, the man or the prophet or the Messiah from the period. Everything seems to have happened 50 and 100 years later in the books. So how do you get around that, L.A.?
Well, that's really not true. We've got a lot of fragments from the first century. Basically what we've got is he's there, and these people, something's happening to their lives. Something dramatic is happening. And they're writing their accounts down. And again, we've got fragments from the first century, a lot of fragments, and partial gospels, partial letters. I mean, it's all there. And I will cede you that, the full manuscripts don't come in till later, but we've got the fragments. And the thing is,
and Paul was later too.
Paul, yeah. But everybody's writing within that, and the apostles, those guys that hung out with them, they're just a bunch of goofballs, really. And I'm not trying to be, as Richard said, blasphemous. They're just a bunch of goofballs. They're just a bunch of guys fishermen from Galilee. And they're men with really, no education per se. But they've hung out with this guy, Jesus, for 3 years, and their lives change. And their lives change dramatically. And eventually, they literally turned Western civilization on its head. It changed everything to the point where even the calendar talks about the birth. Everything now is, BC and AD. I mean, that's how it was for, a long, long time, hundreds and hundreds of years. The bottom line is this, that if there wasn't an experience that changed people's lives, then as Paul says later, if the resurrection really didn't happen, if he really didn't rise from the dead, then all this is just a big joke. We might as well just eat, drink, and be merry, for who cares? But the promise is eternal life. That's what's missed. People don't really talk about this so much. I don't know why, because this is the the crux of the deal. If you can just put it down and reduce it into those terms, the deal is this: we believe on him who was sent. Who was sent? Yeshua. And then we believe that, okay, we screw up. We got all this stuff that we do, a lot of stuff that we do which isn't really cool. And when we ask to have him take that from us and to forgive us, he'll do that. For that, we get eternal life. That's how it works. And things begin to change. The Spirit of a living God then comes upon us. This was done all through for thousands of years in the Old Testament. The prophets and stuff talk about all that. The whole thing is different from when Yeshua comes, and after he resurrects from the dead, everything's changed. And folks, I'm not talking religion here. And a lot of you have been hurt by the church, and I'd like to take a moment to apologize for those of you who have been really hurt by the church. And I'm sorry that you were. But this is really real. It's the most real thing I've ever been involved in. It's a daily walk, and I'm constantly learning and constantly growing. I'm amazed at how prophecy is being fulfilled right in front of us, which everything ties back to his words. Let me just close by saying this. He warns us, Yeshua warns us, that before he returns, there'll be wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence like Ebola, earthquakes in diverse places and troublesome times. 2,000 years ago, there's no way to map earthquakes in diverse places. If you were in Jerusalem and an earthquake happened in Japan, you wouldn't know about it. Now my iPhone rings.
Right.
Now we watch it on satellite TV as the tsunami comes in a half an hour after the earthquake, and the helicopters are up there filming the thing, bouncing it off the satellites, and we're here in America in our living rooms watching the tsunami devastate the coastline of Fukushima. Unprecedented.
With the Nephilim, okay, let's change gears a little bit. I have you know what? I have one more comment on that subject. When I'm a black and white guy, very much a black and white guy, I think there's a lot of proof of when we deal with skeptics out there, and three of us were talking about this earlier today. When you deal with skeptics out there, it frustrates me, because one of the things that we do have is we have a lot of evidence, not only with abduction and eyewitness testimony, but there's plenty of video and sightings and the hundreds of thousands of images that are all over the planet. So we have plenty of evidence. But when it comes to the Romans and Jesus during that period, the Romans who had so much, everything was documented, prisoners and crops and banking, and everything was documented. And when it comes to Jesus, they didn't document his presence there. Nothing is in writing. How do we explain that away? Or is that just something that we have to take on faith?
Well, there are some extra biblical texts which actually talk about that. Josephus, for one, actually mentions Yeshua and mentions the crucifixion. There also are, Roman paperwork, for lack of a better word, but there are Roman documents that talk about, the crucifixion and the rumors of the resurrection. I mean, they talk about this and how this new sect sprung up from this man who supposedly rose from the dead. I mean, that's all part of the historical record, so it is there. It's just that it's not widely spread around. People don't talk about it. I know about it, and I've read those accounts. They're fascinating. The Gospels are fascinating. The Gospel just means good news, because again, look. All I know is this: all these prophecies written thousands of years ago, and then he shows up. The prophecies are fulfilled, and now we're in the period of time where these ancient prophecies written thousands of years ago are beginning to herald the second coming. And I mean, I guess a lot of people can have a real twisted image of who he is, and he's the most amazing, God man I've ever come in contact with. And I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean, it's absolutely incredible when we read the accounts, and then when he becomes alive and he begins to communicate, and he communicates with me. And what I mean, and that sounds really wacky, and I know that, but the Spirit of a living God indwells in the believer. And the Spirit of a living God can instruct us. That's scriptural. It says the Spirit will come and teach you all things. And as we yield ourselves to that, we're taught. And it's a lifelong experience. And as we walk, we learn to distinguish his voice, and we learn to distinguish the voice of the fallen one. And again, going back into spiritual warfare, that's something that I'm constantly engaged in. I'm basically in warfare mode pretty much all the time because of what's going on the planet. And because of what Richard and I do, not only in Watchers, but in the books that I write, we're exposing all this, and that the dark forces do not want it out. They really don't. And so there's a lot of spiritual warfare. Watchers 8 documents that, which is it's a first as far as I know. It's just a first. What happened in that operating theater was just profound, astounding, and unprecedented.
So let's start here. Who were the Nephilim?
The Nephilim are the byproduct or the progeny from the unholy union of the fallen angelic host and the women of earth. Fallen angels having sex with the women, and the offspring becomes a hybrid being known as the Nephilim or the Nephilim. That's what they are. And in the old days, before the flood of Noah, they were giants. They were huge. I mean, really big. Later on, after the flood, they're not as big. And then now we're starting to believe that there's genetic manipulation in the many different tribes of the Nephilim that we see. And everything from giants 9, 10, 11, 12 feet, some of which we find in the Americas, and then normal sized entities like we see in Paracas, but then we've got the elongated skulls, which don't really fit. And preliminary testing, DNA testing, was done on some of those skulls by the late Lloyd Pye, when I've spoken to the geneticist. And basically they said that the segments of the mitochondrial DNA did not match anything in the genome. It's not human, which is exactly what we would expect to see if we had an outside agency manipulating the genome, the gene pool.
Yeah, it's actually some kind of hybrid.
Where did the DNA come from? I mean, are we talking out there? Was it here? Was it a separate species that was combined? Or are we talking about some type of celestial ET injection into the DNA? Guys?
I'm still here.
I'm sorry. Not. I keep hitting my mute button. Sorry about that accident. Not in the classic ET sense. I would say this, that what we're looking at is the fallen angelic host of heaven, which continually screws around with the genome, trying to make man or create man in their image rather than the image of the Most High God. And so we get these hybrid beings, and the Bible is full of it if you know where to look. It talks about, Noah, the movie, came out this year, and it had nothing to do with what's written. Absolutely nothing. It's a complete rewrite of the story. And it made Noah made Noah out like a homicidal maniac. I mean, and the God of the Bible is some weird deal. And the fallen angels were these rock people. I mean, everything was wacky. It had nothing to do with anything. And what people don't understand was there's a cosmic chess match going on here. The reason why the fallen angels come and the reason why their hybrids are being made is to wipe out the human genome. And if the fallen one can do that, it's game over, checkmate, I win. That's what's at stake. And that's why in the text, God says, Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives, that's a vetting process. That's a vetting process, and he says it twice. And it says Noah is pure in all his generations. What that means is Noah is not contaminated by any type of Nephilim or fallen angelic blood or DNA. He's not corrupted his gene pool. So everything gets wiped out. Read the book of Enoch. Richard and I have had long, long discussions about the book of Enoch, which amplifies this whole scenario which is going on in the days of Noah. The Nephilim at one point became so cannibalistic, they would eat and drink the flesh and blood of human beings. They became absolutely bizarre. And it says that the spirits, the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim are now earthbound, and they are what I would consider demonic entities, and they hate the human race. And any of you out there who have ever encountered a demon know exactly what I'm talking about. They are wicked, they are evil, and they are highly malevolent, and they hate human beings.
There are also interestingly fragments of more information about these beings in something known as the Dead Sea Scriptures. Now, they're just fragments of text that were found in those clay vessels in the late 40s. And there's a further description of the original Nephilim as being as tall as trees. So they were really enormous. According to the book of Enoch, they also ate up all of Earth's resources, and that's when they started eating people, because they couldn't provide enough food for the population that was already here and the giants that were on the earth. And the giants apparently, in this research that LA has been doing, that I've kind of gotten to ride in on his saddle a bit here, were all over the world. They weren't just in Israel or in the Middle East or or Iran. What is Iran today? Or Persia? You can find remnants of the Nephilim almost everywhere that we've seen. I mean, Peru is one of the last vestiges of where you can openly go see actual fragments of these giants. But I remember the late Roger Lear once telling me he was on an island somewhere, and I don't remember if it was the Philippine Islands or what, but you know how great he used to be. He would sit down and he'd tell you a story.
Right.
And it was always really entertaining. And he said, the guy there said, he was looking at old artifacts in this one building, and the guy says, "Do you want to see like one of the giants?" And Roger goes, "Sure, where is it?" And he goes, well, so he took him back through a bunch of buildings into a private room where there was this gigantic box, and he pulled the lid off of it, and there was like an 8-foot giant in there. And I mean, this is on an island in the Pacific, so I mean, it's pervasive pretty much everywhere. And I think the part, and I've told LA this, the part that creeps me out the most about it is the worldwide cover-up about it. More so than just finding these beings. It's like, I can deal with that. Okay, there were giants on the earth. Basically, the scriptures tell us that. If we look at the Bible as being an historical book that's basically relating what went on thousands of years ago, well, then we look at that and we go, okay, there were giants here. But why are we not allowed to see them, and why is there so much mystery surrounding doing any research about it? That part I don't understand.
Before we get into that, because that's a huge subject for me, and we're gonna get real deep into that. Let me back up for a second. Is there a connection with the Anunnaki and the Nephilim, or are they one and the same?
I believe that they are the same. I believe that they're one and the same. The Anunnaki, when you see them pictured, they are winged entities, and that to me is describing the fallen angelic host, not the good guys. And what's funny is like, Zechariah Sitchin and the whole ancient alien crowd looks at the Anunnaki, and that's what they and they'll say, well, this is far older than the biblical narrative. And what they don't understand is, no, it's not. It's just that the biblical narrative picks up. Moses is writing this whole thing. It goes back. The Anunnaki, I believe, is basically another name and talks about what happened when the fallen angelic host came down and did what they did. The Book of Enoch, as we talked about earlier, certainly amplifies that in ways that those clay tablets, the Anunnaki, and the work of Zechariah Sitchin just can't do. And other, critics of Sitchin's work have said that some of these things have been grossly mistranslated, and there's been great liberty taken. What I like about the Book of Enoch is that this book, at one point, and I believe it still does, it comes in before the Book of Genesis and the Ethiopian Bible, and has done for centuries that way. Again, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, widely quoted in the Tanakh, the Old Testament, quoted in the New Testament in 3 different places. Again, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Plus, it describes beings in the Book of Enoch that are also described in the Book of Revelation. I mean, almost to a T.
Yeah.
Okay, continue, L.A.
So, in my opinion, the place to really look at the Book of Enoch. I mean, if any of your listeners are at all inquisitive about this, check out the Book of Enoch, and then go to Genesis 6 in the Bible, and you'll see that the Book of Enoch amplifies Genesis 6, and then we see that this is the telling verse, and Moses is writing this hundreds of years after the flood. He's saying the Nephilim were on the earth, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had children by them. These were men of renown, and it goes on from there. And the bottom line is the sons of God are always the angelic host. It doesn't specify the fallen ones, but that's what it is. It's the fallen guys.
Isn't that exactly the timeline might be off, but wasn't that exactly what Sitchin was saying?
Well, that's my point, more or less.
Right.
But he's saying it's the Anunnaki, and they're from another planet, and they were here to mine gold, and they created mankind as a slave species and all this other stuff, which I don't buy at all. I think that's twisted mythos. I think there's a thread of truth there, but it falls short of the mark. And get this, there's no prophecy, really, in the writings of Sitchin or the Anunnaki per se. Not the kind of prophecy that we have in the biblical narrative. And that's why I always go back to that, because it shows us that someone is outside space and time as we know it, and can delineate future events and do so with great specificity. And there's only one guy that does that 100% accurate, and that's the God of the Bible. All the other books on the planet don't have that type of accuracy. And look, with all due respect to Nostradamus, you can sit there with your quatrains and you can interpret them in so many different ways. When we look at a scripture, we talked about this earlier, and so it's apropos. In the latter days, I will regather you from the four corners of the earth and reestablish you in your ancient homeland, never to be removed again. That's prophecy. That's fulfilled. Israel has been regathered. That prophecy is thousands of years old, and yet we're watching it manifest right here, right now. That's incredible.
This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We are bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your humble host, Jimmy Church. We are talking with L.A. Marzulli and Rick Shaw, producers and host of the Watchers series of DVDs. And I announced, Rick, earlier today that we're going to be giving away some DVDs, so be prepared for that when we take some calls here in a little bit.
All right.
Okay, now back to the Giants. And I do want to get knee deep with the Smithsonian. We're going to go right there. But when we refer to giants, and when we talk about somebody that's 7'6" or 8 foot tall, we have people, that tall today walking around on Earth. Why would it be such a big deal happening 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago?
Well, the giants that existed back then. And we got many different records. Some of these are more like 10, 11, 12 feet, 9 feet, between 9 and 12 feet. Let's just be conservative. Og, who is mentioned in the biblical narrative, may have been as tall as 15 feet. Goliath was probably between 9 and 12 feet somewhere. I believe closer to 12 feet. What's interesting, and I actually blogged about this recently, I was out on Catalina Island, and I was able to examine photographs by the primitive archaeologist Ralph Glidden, who at the time of taking these photographs was in fact employed by the High Museum. It's in the early part of Glidden's career. And he's, again, employed by the High Museum. And we were and this is the one photo on my blog, which will remain there, but there are others that we found. And what's interesting about this is it shows Ralph Glidden standing in a pit, and in front of him is a skeleton in situ. It has not been touched. It's not a bone pile. The skeleton is intact in situ. It's there. In other words, uncovered in exactly the same way it was placed in the grave. And I was able to do a triple blind study with 3 people who analyzed the photograph, and using computer software were then able to extrapolate based on the height of Ralph Glidden of 5'8", the height of the skeleton in front of him. And all 3 of these guys put it between 8'6" and 9 feet. That's a really big guy. And it's just not supposed to be there. The bottom line is it's not supposed to be there. And 8'6", closer to 9 feet, that's not normal. That's outside the realm of even some of the tallest human beings that are on record.
What happened to those bones? I know there was a bunch that he had on display, and then he sold them, and away they went. But what happened to that skeleton? And by the way, everybody, the audience, we're talking about Catalina Island, right off of the coast of California down here in Los Angeles. But what happened to those bones?
Well, conveniently, according to one article I read, that the bones were packed on a ship which promptly sank in the channel. Now, whether that's true or not, I have no idea. I've not been able to find the name of the ship and the storm, or whether it really did sink. But that's what allegedly happened to some of them. What's interesting is there's already a debunking program by certain debunkers out there trying to tell us that, we're going wrong here, and that these photographs aren't really what they say, and that these photographs were staged. Well, you can say anything you want. The bottom line is the people, the naysayers who were saying this, have no idea, because they've never seen the photograph, one. They've never spent the money or the time or had anyone analyze the photograph. So they're just saying things and not backing it up, where once the new book on Betrayal of a Nephilim Volume 2 is released, the reader can decide for themselves whether or not they're looking at the picture, these 3 different experts, whether their work is slipshod or whether their work is absolutely right on. And what's interesting is it was a triple blind study. They didn't know about each other. And all of them, again, no collusion. They didn't know. That's why it's a triple blind study, examining the photograph based on Glidden's height of 5'8", put that skeleton between 8'6" and 9 feet. So,
well,
look, it's not conclusive, Jimmy.
Sure.
But it's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the stories are numerous, and you've been researching not only around the world, but across the United States. And when you start to correlate not only what was found out at Catalina Island, but the other, giant skeletons that have been found across the United States. And once you find one and you find another, and then you start to join the 2 studies together and the research together, that's, it's not an anomaly out at Catalina. It's happened all over the place.
Absolutely.
Now,
we've got areas that we're working on in undisclosed locations where we have written letters to Native American tribes informing them that these are not Native American burials. And your tradition, your oral tradition, talks about a race of red-haired cannibalistic giants. We want to prove your oral traditions allow us to dig, and that's what we're hoping for.
Hold on. Stop right there. Wait, whoa. What do you mean not of Native American tradition burials? What separates, what would indicate a native, because I don't know.
Well, we have found evidence of very elaborate crypts in the Midwest and in other parts of the country. Very elaborate crypts where people created waterproof areas with white clay, for instance, and using the clay and packing the clay and gravel. I mean, whoever did this, they really knew what they were. They knew engineering. They knew how to preserve something. And so Native Americans, there's a difference between Native American burials and some of these other burials. For instance, and this is a very controversial statement to make, the mound builders, for instance, in Ohio, the modern day archaeologists will insist that these are Native Americans. I've spoken to Native American tribes, and many Native, for instance, Chief Joseph Riverwood, who's a Taino war chief, has declared to me on numerous occasions that Native Americans did not build these type of edifices. And many of the oral traditions that we get tell us that these were here before they got here. They found them like this. In other words, the Great Circle Mound in Newark, Ohio.
Right.
And so this jibes with all of our research, and it goes back to the Nephilim tribes that fled the Levant during the conquest of Canaan or Israel by Israel, of the Promised Land, as it were, 3,500 years ago. And lo and behold, this is when we find the nascent beginnings of the Paracas culture down in Peru that Rick and I saw.
With all of this, there was a phenomena that went down. I'm only saying this for the audience. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Which in 1890s, in the late 1800s through the early 1900s, there seemed to be a lot of giant skeleton discoveries all across the United States. And it seemed the local newspaper would report on the story. And then somewhere in that text, and I've read tons of it, the word Smithsonian pops up.
Yep.
And then that's the end of this. There's no follow-up story, and there's no bones. Please explain, if you can.
Go ahead, Rick.
That's the part where I felt like the whole thing is conspiratorial, because in putting together Watcher 6, LA sent me a ton of these newspaper clippings, and I wanted more. So I did my own research and pulled even more of them, and kept finding ones that were like in the New York Times, the LA Times. This is back in like 1882 up through the early 20th century, where they mentioned, the bones were given to the Bureau of Ethnology, which delivered them to the Smithsonian for national study, and so on and so forth. So if you call the Smithsonian, they have no record of these bones, even though it was in the New York Times. And one evening, LA happened to be on the other network, Coast to Coast, and basically said, why has the Smithsonian been hiding this research? And he got a rather terse letter from the Smithsonian Institute saying, you can come look in our back rooms all you want so that you can make, quote unquote, your big discovery, in a very condescending way. I felt like they wrote this letter. But we've heard other stories that these bones were just summarily disposed of and dropped in the Atlantic Ocean, and various things happened to them so that they don't have them. But according to newspaper clippings of that era, they once did. So what is it they don't want us to know? That's what creeps me out about this whole phenomena.
Did they, L.A., have you published that letter? I would love to see it.
I was just thinking about that. I have not published that letter. I probably should do that at some point.
Put it on the Trail 3.
Yeah, maybe on the Trail 3. But, there it was. It was from, a guy at the Smithsonian. And it was, like Rick said, very condescending. And the reason, in my opinion, and I think Rick will back me up on this, the reason why they don't want it out is because it goes against the Darwinian paradigm, and it bolsters and points back to the biblical narrative. And that's what they're deathly afraid of, because it proves on some level, and this is why we're on the trail, because if we get DNA evidence legally from Peru or from a find here in the United States, we've got archaeologists, one down in Peru, one in Spain, and 2 in the United States. And this is what we do. And we are working to try to get DNA evidence. And I guarantee it, once we get the DNA evidence, we're going to go where it tells us. If it comes back and it's human beings, then we got to go back, rework our hypothesis, and move on and see where we're going wrong. But if our hypothesis is correct, what we believe is that the DNA evidence will point to an outside agency manipulating the genome or influencing the genome, which is not Denisovan or Neanderthal or anything else. And this, of course, is exactly what we should find if these are the progeny of fallen angels and the women of Earth. This is exactly what we'd expect to find.
And the line between angels and aliens seems rather thin at times.
Well, it does for all of us. Like I said earlier in the show, it seems to. I think we're all getting smarter. You know, we're all learning every single day, and that line in the sand is getting really blurred, and it just starts to make sense. That's all. For all of us, it kind of makes sense.
I saw a poll the other day that was done where the question was asked, do you believe in extraterrestrial life? And in this poll, 99% of the respondents said yes. I mean, that was the most overwhelming response I've ever seen in a poll like that. So I'm thinking, well, whatever's going on is working. People are starting to realize that, you know, we're not alone in this universe, and there's a lot of things that we don't understand, and should start looking at things a bit differently.
I have a very smart audience, which I'm very fond of, and I'm going to put LA on the mark here. Somebody just tweeted, is one of the giant sites in Fort Wayne, Indiana?
Yes.
When you were saying undisclosed locations, and this popped up, what's going on in Fort Wayne? Can you talk about it?
We're not there doing anything with it. That's just an older site. Fort Wayne, Indiana, was a place where, over a century ago, they were unearthing all sorts of artifacts. We're looking in some other places, which are still non-disclosed. We're not telling you where they are. But
I'll say this: I went to junior high and high school in Indiana, and I think it was 8th grade, took Indiana history, right? And one of the things that our teacher pointed out, and it was fascinating to me at that age, were the mounds in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And he had said, and the thing is, when a teacher says something, especially at that age, to a class, you tend to accept it as fact because you're holding up the teacher as just your teacher, right? Everything is, for lack of a better term here, gospel. And he had said that some say they were made by Indians, but really we don't know who made all of these mounds in Indiana. And these mounds are everywhere. Indiana, north of Brown County, is basically flat. You know, the glaciers came down and leveled out the state. It's flat. And these mounds are everywhere. There are no hills. You can't go skiing in Indiana. There's like one spot, Valparaiso. But other than that, it's flat. And then you have in the middle of a cornfield, you'll have these hills. And they're everywhere. But my teacher had said then, and I never forgot this, we don't know who made them.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. Modern day archaeologists will tell us that Native Americans used birch bark baskets and dog sleds to move the dirt and clamshells and whatever. I was just at a museum a couple of days ago on this last excursion out, and they were showing us artifacts, and they were trying to tell us that these were hoes. They were made of flint. Well, that won't work because, first of all, these flints showed no sign of wear at all. Second of all, if you used it as a hoe, if you were able to make a hoe out of it, you'd break it almost immediately. That's not what it's for. And this blade was about, almost 18 inches long. It's huge. But if it's a knife blade, now we're looking at something else.
Interesting.
We also found an 8.5 pound axe. When was the last time you swung an 8.5 pound axe?
And not me.
Yeah, and you can't.
Right.
It's just it's not. But in the hands of an 8-footer all day long, yeah, that'll work.
Why do you think, and it's not only with the giants, but it seems like anything across the United States that would prove somebody else was here once before the American Indians, and it would be, some historical changing paradigm. It seems like the Smithsonian comes in, and look at the caves, the supposed caves with the Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon.
Right.
Who came in? Smithsonian. Where are the caves? They're missing. What interest does the Smithsonian have with squashing ancient history here in the United States?
Well, in my opinion, every action that they do is to uphold the idea and the paradigm of Darwin. In other words, everything. Darwinism is sacrosanct. Darwinism is up on a pedestal. Darwinism is the paradigm in which both academia and the scientific community operate under on a global level. Not only here in the States, it's a global, for lack of a better word, religion. That's what it is.
Sure.
And it's not proven. And yet Darwinism, that's academia and the scientific community, that's what they base everything on. And so anything that comes up against Darwinism and would show a supernatural world or a world of prophecy or bolster somehow the biblical narrative is immediately dealt with. This, folks, is intellectual fascism. That's what it is. It's fascism. They are controlling the information. And anyone, see, what enables me to do what I do, and Rick and I together, is we're not tied to a university. We're not tied to a network. We can go where we want to go and interview the people that we want to interview. And we're not, we're free. We're intellectually free. Well, I'll just give you an example. There was a forensic anthropologist who I had several meetings with. And at one point, he leans over the table after he's trying to debunk all the Catalina stuff. And he comes clean. And he says to me, L.A., I know where there's a femur that's about 30 inches long. They just discovered it in Los Angeles. And, I can't tell you where it is, but they just discovered it. And they want me to come and look at it, but I can't go. And I said, why not? And he says, because it will rewrite American history. And I looked at him and said, but that's a good thing. Don't you want to go where the truth is? And at that point, he just kind of looked down and didn't say anything. But see, he'll lose his tenure. He'll lose his job. He'll be ousted by the scientific community. And, I know that people are going to say, oh, that's an absurd statement to make, L.A. And yet, I've got archaeology books here written by tenured professors. And I've spoken to archaeologists who are tenured professors at universities. And I've asked them, what about the account from 1920, which isn't that long ago, 90 years ago, roughly. And what about the account where a medical doctor who was examining a skeleton in situ and estimates the skeleton to be about 9 feet? And, he's a man of letters. And I was told by a tenured archaeological professor at a major university, and I quote, the medical doctor in the 1920s did not know how to measure. That's what I got. That was the answer. And I just went, are you kidding me?
Right.
Are you kidding me? That's all you got? That's the only way you can defend this?
Well, that's what all skeptics do. All debunkers. That's the easy. Just you and I were talking about this earlier today, but I really mean this. All they do is say no.
That's it.
That's it. That's
all they got.
That's all they got. When we talk about ET and all the evidence that we have that we're being visited right now as we're doing this show, and they just go no. Well, that's what do we have? We have eyewitness testimony. We have videotape. We have government documents. We have photographs and images, and I have seen stuff with my own two eyes, brother. And all you got to say is no.
Yeah, and also physical evidence.
Yeah, physical evidence. There's plenty of it. I do want to get to some of that, too, by the way. Okay, this question has popped up in Twitter twice, so I'm just going to throw this out. It's out of left field, but J.D. Redding says, I still would like to know the guest opinion on Atlantis. and how this fits in your paradigm.
Well, Atlantis certainly could have existed. We know that the world was flooded. We also realize that the continents at one point could have all been attached together. And if they were, that's sort of an interesting concept. We know from the biblical narrative that it says very specifically the earth was divided in the days of Peleg. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean the earth was divided? It pulled apart? And I believe it certainly could be. Atlantis would certainly be pre-flood in the days of Noah. And yeah, that continent certainly could have sunk. It's not what people think it is. For instance, let me just hop in here and throw you guys a curve. When Rick and I were down in Peru, Brian Forrester took us to a place called Sacsayhuaman. And Brian did us an amazing favor because he brought us in to the high point where the thrones are, where you're above the artifact, this huge megalithic wall, and you can see it and get a feel for the scope. And these thrones were cut into the rock, and they were machines. I mean, some machine did this. We have no idea what, but this isn't some guy going ting, 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 copper chisels. And we're sitting there, and the thrones blew us away. And then we go down there, and Rick's shooting, we're filming all this stuff for watchers. We're doing the interviews. And I'm standing next to this wall. These megalithic stones, they're andesite, which is about 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. They're very hard. And they're thousands of years old. And all they've got is copper chisels. And you can use arsenic or whatever you want to try to harden them, but there's no way you can cut and shape these things. Plus, the quarry is about 40 miles away and 2,000 feet lower. And the Inca, or whoever the Native American tribe down there, I don't care who, the indigenous people, all they've got is llamas. So how the heck are they moving these things? And these stones weigh 40, 60, 90, 120 tons or even more, and they're fitted together perfectly, absolutely perfectly. And the stones have no mortar. It's called ashlar construction, and they are polygonal in shape. And on the Trail of the Nephilim and also Watcher 6, we've got close-ups of this stuff, and it's mind-boggling. The archaeologist sits there, and they have no idea, if they're honest, if they're intellectually honest, they have no flipping idea
None.
how or who built this thing. They have no idea at all.
And even more incredible were the trapezoidal holes that were lined up in perfectly straight rows in that same andesite stone. I mean, to me, that's harder than just making a rock and setting it into a wall, even though that in itself is an amazing thing. These were holes that were perfectly straight and slightly trapezoidal that went nowhere.
Well, there's one point that I need to drive home here that you just mentioned this, but it needs to be driven home. You can't see this in a videotape. When you are standing there on a DVD, when you're standing there next to one of those 50-ton carved polygonal megalithic boulders, part of a wall, and you look 40 miles away downhill, across a valley to where the quarry is, and you need to wrap your mind around how it got from there to here, that needs to be driven home. Forget about how it was made. How did it just get there? And if they carved it on site, that means that boulder was probably twice as big when they quarried it and then brought it up and then did the fitting into the wall.
Well, exactly.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
The wall that LA was just talking about in Sacsayhuaman, the stones, I believe, were quarried some 40 miles away.
40 miles away. 40 miles 3,000 years ago?
And some of them were so large that if you weighed them, they'd be about 120 tons for one stone.
Right. Fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating.
And also, that's why, to me, like these drawings with people, thousands of people with ropes and logs, it's ridiculous. I mean, because otherwise you would see some kind of construction damage on these rocks, rubbing marks, chipped edges, something where they banged into each other when they were being transported in, and there's none of that.
Right.
They're all so smooth when you rub them with your hand. LA will tell you this. They're just like smooth. They're like almost polished a bit. I mean, they seem like they were somehow softened when they were built and hardened in a shape, like a pillow. A lot of them look like that, and so that's the mortarless construction. It looks just like they were punched into position and hardened, and that's the way they've been for centuries.
You know, and this is another point that needs to be driven home. I've said this with so many guests on the show, but those walls down there, really, if you look at it, they don't really serve a purpose. They don't make any sense. And if you're the leader of that village, that community, that city, what are you telling everybody that is a good idea to build, if you know what I mean? Because you have to farm, you have to feed, clothe, build shelters, and basically survive every single day. And you're going to take the manpower of the entire village or city or town and go and quarry and drag these rocks across. So they were done for a reason, and we don't really know. I mean, the walls are just sitting there, and that's a point that needs to be driven home. I mean, there was some assistance from somewhere. I'm not saying divine. I don't know, but it got done somehow, and the elders of the village thought that it was a good idea and somehow convinced every man, woman, and child that this is what we're going to do for the next 100, 150 years, is we're going to build this wall.
I believe that there was a high-tech component involved in this.
Yes, I do too.
Totally.
And it's not that they all had Macintosh computers and iPads trying to figure this out. It's a different kind of high tech. It's their understanding of how the Earth worked, how the grid system worked, the magnetic domains on the Earth. All of that stuff was taken into play, and they could have even communicated using these structures.
What I'm trying to say is they didn't do it in the conventional sense. That's what I'm trying to say. Somehow that was easy to do.
Yeah, and it's playful. When we look at in Cusco, which is right next to Sacsayhuaman, they'll make, let's say, a 10-ton boulder, and all of a sudden, where it's connecting to another stone, there's this little like curve that goes down 2 or 3 inches, like a crescent moon, just a little curve. It's like, what? What the heck?
Why?
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 Because they can, and they're not sweating it. They're able to do it. And I call all this stuff, I call it Nephilim architecture, fallen angel architecture. That's what I call it. And, before you dismiss that, Giorgio Tsoukalos and the ancient astronaut crowd, they're saying the same thing, except they're going, hey, ancient alien, ancient alien, ancient alien. All you got to do is flip it and say, instead of ancient alien, just say fallen angelic host, technology, Book of Enoch stuff. Bam, there it is. There it is, right there, screaming at us.
Yeah, I guess Giorgio was down there interviewing our guy, Senior Juan. It's really,
I like his baseball hat too, Senior Juan. Yeah, pretty cool guy.
Yeah, he reminds me of he's such a cool guy. He reminds me of like a kind of an American Indian looking kind of character, like you would have seen in an X-Files episode or something.
Mm-hmm.
This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We're talking to L.A. Marzulli and Rick Shaw, the Watchers series of DVDs, and, of course, L.A.'s books and everything else. All the links, I did see those tweets earlier. You can go both to Rick Shaw's Pinlight site and also L.A. It's lamarzulli.net, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, the links are all there. Okay. When you guys are wait, no, do this for me. How cool is Brian Forrester? Is he like the ultimate bomb? I mean, seriously, I've watched so much of his stuff, and I'm going to get him on the show here hopefully sooner than later. He's the busiest guy in the world. But is he like a man's man or what? L.A., you can say yes. It's okay.
No, he's, Brian, I Skyped him this morning. We had a nice little talk. He's just a great guy. Great guy, great to hang out with. And, there's a real camaraderie with what we do. And it's, we're on the trail. Absolutely.
He definitely doesn't toe the party line in Peru.
No, or Egypt for that matter.
Exactly.
I was watching some of his video the other day, some recent stuff of him over in Giza, And I don't know what kind of crazy camera he's using now, but he's really doing this really great work over there. And I'm just like, man, I want to be Brian Forrester. I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy. Is the guy. I really like. You're right. He doesn't toe the party line. Yeah, he sleeps with one eye open. No doubt. No doubt about it.
No, he doesn't toe the party line. I mean, some of the stuff that if you go on a tour with an official tour group there in Peru, you'll be told all of this stuff and shown examples as far as models with these structures with straw roofs over them. And you look at that and you go, they didn't have straw roofs over these super megalithic structures. That's ridiculous. These things were super high tech. So they just don't, I'm afraid they don't quite get what's really going on even in their own country. And I think part of the problem in getting DNA evidence out of Peru is I think that the officials in Peru are worried about their reputation of being one that harbored aliens.
How do the Orthodox anthropologists and archaeologists, but anthropologists, how do they get away with the nose suture cracks in those skulls? I mean, I don't get that. Well, let me ask you this. In a normal human skull, in mine, in my children's, in my wife's, we all have those suture marks, correct?
Correct.
Is there some anomaly that would not have those suture marks in you or myself or Rick or our children? Does it occur naturally ever?
The only thing that we know of is called fusion. When someone is very old, sometimes those sutures fuse together and it's difficult to see them. But normally we all have those. And as your head is going through the birth canal, there has to be some flex in the bone structure there.
And that's it. That's the end of it. That's the end of the story. We all have those suture marks.
Yes. The only exception was, and I'll let LA chime in on this too, but I just had a discussion once about some of the skulls that we saw. Remember the Waikiki skull, LA?
Yeah.
The ones that he had, that Danielle had, on that table behind you, that where the sutures actually went straight through the forehead and into the nasal cavity.
And that shouldn't be there either.
Right.
That's weird. But when I talked to Dr. Lear about that, evidently there are some people that exhibit that suturing still today. Although you wouldn't know until long after their death, where you could actually look at their skull and examine to see if that's the case. But to have a suture running through your forehead is pretty weird. I mean, it's like verging on Klingon or something.
Yeah, I'm laughing with you, LA. That was good. Rick,
you know what I mean by
Rick is here all week, ladies and gentlemen. Tip the waitresses. That was well done. Let me back up for a second. One of the questions I think that we all have is the volume of the cranium itself. Is the brain elongated too? Does it fill up the skull too as well? Is it a larger brain?
We found one skull down there that was about 30% more cranial capacity than there's like parameters, and it's like. This was, let's say, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Let's just say it's 20 or it's around 2,000 cc's. Let's just use that number. I'm not saying it is, but let's just say it is. All of a sudden, and that's the high end. So one skull in the Paracas Museum showed us 30% more capacity than the top end. In other words, it would be like 30% more than 2,000 cc's. So yeah, I mean, we found a few skulls that exhibited this, and that was,
But Jimmy's question is: are you asking if there was something else in that area other than the brain? Jimmy?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Does the brain stay this? There's no way of telling.
There's no partitioning of the skull or anything that would make us think that it just wasn't full of brain matter.
Right, because when everybody thinks the same thing, you look at one of those elongated skulls, or any of the Egyptian hieroglyphs that show, skulls like that. That is it full of brain? Is that? I don't want to sound stupid here, but that's what everybody thinks. That's exactly where we go. Is that all brain?
Well, it is. I mean, that's what we believe it is. I mean, there's no way to tell for sure, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the skulls are within normal human range, but there's a certain percentage of the skulls which are 25 to 35% larger cranial capacity than what is outside the parameters for, it just shouldn't be there. And this is
apparently there's some people. There is a picture that Brian sent us of a man who is just walking the streets in Nazca that has a fairly elongated skull today.
Wow. Well, Nancy Nurse just tweeted, and this is was my next question. No sutures? Does that mean no birth canal? And that means impossible? And how, are you following me? Where do they come from if there's no sutures?
There was a journal that Brian sent me, which is going to be on the trail of the Nephilim too. It's Peruvian Antiquities. The year is 1842. This is before archaeology is sort of a science. It's being birthed. And these guys are down in Peru, and remember, it's before cameras, and so you would take an artist with you, or you were a field artist yourself, and you learned to draw by hand everything that you were seeing, or you employed someone to do that because you had to do it. And even back then, 1842 now, it's a long time ago, there's this controversy raging in what's then the scientific and academic community. Well, these are all cradle headboarders. There can't possibly be anything else but cradle headboarding, blah, blah, blah. What's interesting is these guys found a mummy, and they opened up the mummy, and it was it was a woman who was pregnant in about the 7th month of pregnancy. And they opened her up to see what the fetus would look like, because it was a mummy. And lo and behold, they found a fetus, and this is all in the new book. The fetus had an elongated skull. And according to the pictures, the fetus had teeth. And that's not supposed to be there. So the fetus had an elongated skull, and it had teeth. And they go on and say that this is, it's not closure but it is pointing to the idea that it's not cradle headboarded, that the cradle headboarding is done because the average Joe is trying to look and emulate something
that they've seen or lived with. Right.
Exactly.
Yep. As somebody that they respected, deity-ish, if you know what I'm saying.
That's right. No, I know exactly what you're saying. It's exactly.
They had some kind of powers or maybe telepathy or something.
Or they landed in a spaceship that looked really cool and came and taught them things, and they waited for them to come back. And the only way they could do that was headboard some heads, and hopefully they would attract. I'm just saying that's how my brain works. I'm just saying they were just hoping that those beings would come back, and maybe doing this would be, and what's the plenty of societies around the world have shown this exact trait, and it happens almost instantly overnight. When they want something to come back, they pray for it, and they do what they can to try to attract them once again. I'm just saying. Did I stop you in your tracks? But that's how my brain works. One of the things. And I want to float back, and then I want to talk about some other stuff in the DVDs. Is 200 years ago, 100 years ago, British archaeologists coming over here, or the British Museum, whatever, over in Egypt, South America, the United States, whatever, and they immediately make a statement. Well, these were made with copper chisels. Well, we didn't know any better back then. So it goes into the books. It's what we are taught in class, and then that's where it stays. Today we know about diorite. We know how hard andesite is. We know how hard red granite is, and we know how ineffective copper chisels or anything else that was used in the Bronze Age is against these materials. You can't cut diamond with a copper chisel or chicken bones. It doesn't happen. And today we are all the wiser to that. I don't know when the Orthodox archaeology is going to backpedal and say, okay, we need to rewrite some textbooks. But it's inevitable. We're not that dumb now. You know, and that's it. And it's guys like you and other guys, Brian Forrester and Michael Cremo and Robert Schock and guys out there that are willing to, John Anthony West. It's that type of research that all of us now, that is where, I want to say this correctly and with respect, but that's where the real research is happening today. It's outside of the box where it was outside of the box 150 years ago. You know what I mean? That was outside of the box. Now today, it's all of us that are in shows like this where we are thinking outside the box, where the real research is going, and I commend you guys for that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay, all right. Now let's have some fun. You know what? I just got some email from Graham Hancock. It came in 4 minutes ago. He wants to talk tomorrow. Wow. Hey, that's a cool email, huh?
Hi, Graham.
Hey, Graham, what's up? I had him on the show a couple of weeks ago. We're trying to schedule him coming back before he heads back to England. And, wow, I'm going to have to change schedules this week. Oh, okay. Now, Jaime Maussan. Let's talk about a little bit about Mexico and what's going on there. But before we do that, with all of the stuff with watchers that you guys have put together and everything that you have, everybody that you've spoken to, what's the one piece of evidence? Oh, and we have to talk about the Malibu deep underwater base. Also, you know what? Before I get to that question, while it's on the front of my mind, Rick, audience, I'm going to announce this right now. In Watchers 7, Rick sent me the map. Have you seen this, L.A., by the way? Did he share this with you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In Watcher 7, Rick videotapes himself a UFO on Pacific Coast Highway, and in Watcher 7, it's subtitled, Shot at Point Magoo. Now, we all know now what was to your right as you were heading up the highway is that discovery that's out there. You didn't know about that when you shot this videotape. It was before we did the discovery. So I want you to take the audience through that really quick. It's pretty significant. And had you known about the Malibu base, I think you would have presented that UFO you would have expanded on it a little bit. But what did you see? And were you just driving up PCH and you happen to have a camera in your car? How did it happen?
No, it was Father's Day, and so my wife Mary goes, "What do you want to do today?" And I'm somewhat a dweeb, I guess. I want to go shoot some B-roll for Watcher 7. And I'm jumping up and down with glee, and she's going, "Oh, okay, great, let's go do that." So where do we have to go? And I said, I want to go out there by Point Magoo, where they always are showing like Iron Man driving by in his, Audi, because it's a really cool area.
It is. It's beautiful.
So, I have a 2001 Corvette, and I use it in Watchers because it's a fun car. It's very shootable.
You don't have to make excuses. It's a cool car.
It's an excuse to drive it somewhere.
Right,
so,
right. There you go.
I also have a couple GoPro cameras. And so I thought, well, I just need some fill shots for some of the stuff that we're talking about. And of course, LA lives in Malibu, so he's like pretty much in that area anyway. But I attached a camera to the fender of the car and was driving past that big, huge rock there at Point Magoo, and went one direction, turned around, reattached the camera on the hood of the car, and drove back. And so basically I'm headed towards Santa Monica on PCH, going by the big rock there with the ocean off to the right, and didn't see anything. There was just nothing to see. And I get home and I put up the video on my HD TV in my studio. I went, what's this annoying light in the sky? Is there an internal reflection? Because, GoPro cameras have this clear case that protects them from rocks and wind, and, you can use them underwater and stuff. And this is back before the Hero 3 Plus came out. So I did this with a Hero 2 camera. Well, it was every time I was facing Santa Monica on PCH, I got this twinkling white orb in my shot. So, I mean, I've done this a long time. I know the difference between a lens flare and reflections, or a lens reflection, that kind of thing. And it wasn't any of those things, but I thought, well, why didn't I see it with my eye?
It's
really
big.
existed.
It's big.
Yeah, and I didn't see anything. So I wonder if it's like one of these UFOs that Jaime's always talking about that's only seen in the infrared spectrum. So I grabbed my Sony remote, shot it at the Hero camera, and put the little monitor on the back of the camera, and boink, I could see a bright blue light flickering in the lens when I did that. I'm going, it's picked up an infrared UFO.
Wow.
And it was there for, oh my gosh, I was doing that for almost an hour. So that UFO, I'm estimating it was just hanging there for at least 40 minutes. So, the Hero is not the best camera to do that kind of thing because it's an incredibly wide angle lens. It's like 14 millimeters or something. So it makes everything that's already small, smaller. So I took the shot into After Effects, which is a kind of a professional compositing program. And you can enlarge stuff greatly in After Effects and really see what's going on there. And to my shock, there were like two little lights on this thing oscillating back and forth. And when I kept looking at it, it was throwing off what looked like sparks, little beams of light. Now, they couldn't have been light beams because they were curved, and it was like throwing particles off. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. But that thing was up there. So I think the idea that there's some kind of a base out there is most likely factual.
L.A., how close are you to the Malibu? What part of Malibu are you in?
I'm in the Santa Monica Mountains. I'm in North End. About 15 minutes from Point Doom.
What, with all of your time out there, and I know you've lived there for a long time, a lot of sightings. Have you seen anything personally out over the Malibu base?
Yeah, we actually covered it in the very first Watchers. Rick did a sort of a mock-up of what my wife and I saw. We ate at Spruzzo's, a little Italian restaurant. It's winter time. I forget the month, but it was winter. It was dark. So we finished eating, and we got in the car, and she's driving, and we're driving up Pacific Coast Highway to home, north on Pacific Coast. And we're on Zuma Beach, PCH, right by Zuma Beach. And she goes, "What the heck is that?" And I look out the window, and there's a very, very bright light hanging in the sky. I go, "Oh, that's probably a plane." When the plane comes at you, that's what you see. So I keep looking at it, and she's driving, so she's not looking at it. And I'm going, it's not moving. It's just kind of sitting there. This is kind of, maybe it's a helicopter. And I kept looking at the thing, and about a minute later, all of a sudden, above it, another light appeared and slowly descended into the larger light. And then the larger light broke apart in concentric circles and vanished. And at that point, I said, oh, my gosh, we're not in Kansas anymore. And about 2 minutes later, bam, it reappeared again. We watched it do this 2 or 3 times. Our car was towed. We had a radiator problem about a month and a half ago. So I'm in the car. Car's in the back of a flatbed tow truck. I'm in the cab with the driver. We're driving down the Malibu Auto to get my car fixed, okay? And talking to the tow truck driver, just making small talk. And he goes, how long have you lived here? And I go, well, since 1974. That's 40 years. And he goes, wow, you're an old timer. I go, well, I guess you could say that. He pauses a moment, and he goes, you ever see anything weird up there? And I just start laughing. And I told him, I said, well, you're looking at a man who's written 9 books on the subject, related or directly about it. And he goes, oh, yeah, really? And I told him I did. And he says, he was driving down Pacific Coast Highway about 1 o'clock in the morning. And above him were 3 craft. He pulled over. There were other cars stopped on Pacific Coast Highway. There were 3 craft. And this is what's interesting. It's in the vicinity of near the Malibu Fish, right on Pacific Coast Highway. That is a few miles from where the site is. In other words, it's inland from the site.
Right.
For these craft to go there would be, I mean, it's like they're still in the parking lot, if you get my drift.
Right.
Okay? It's like right there. And there were three of them. He took his iPhone to get a picture, and his iPhone was too hot to handle and was glowing orange. And the phone finally cooled down. And we watched these things for about 15 minutes. Two of them sped off northward. The other one went straight up in the sky.
What do you think now that this potential discovery of an alien base or otherwise right out there, right at that spot in between Magoo and Doom?
Say that again, one more time.
I said, what do you think about now with all of the sightings that have been going on in Malibu for decades? You've seen them. Rick has documented. It's been going on forever. And now this potential base is discovered right there in between Doom and Magoo. Significant?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the deepest trenches on the planet, the Channel Islands. That waterway is where all the cargo ships go. We talked about maybe getting out there. From what I understand, that water is very, very dark, and visibility is not really good. Very dark, visibility sucks, basically. So, I mean, even if we had a camera that would go down 1,000 feet or whatever, I don't know what we'd see. You'd probably see 20 feet in front of a light, and that would be it. Before we mount an expedition like that, we need to do our homework and talk to divers who sort of know the area. And there may be a time of the year, let's say when the Santa Anas are blowing, where the tides get reversed and the water clears up, and that might be the time to do it. Or if an El Nino comes up, the water can change. I mean, I've seen it on Zuma, where tides like El Nino will happen from Mexico, and all of a sudden visibility is like Hawaii. You can see everything. Most of the time you can't see anything. So, we need to do the homework before we go out there. But I would love to check that out, and I think there's something to it.
And also the rumors of giants on the Channel Islands too, as well.
Yep, they're out there.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, you know what? We're almost out of time. We didn't take any phone calls. Let's give away some DVDs real quick. 323-825-5045. I've opened up the phone lines. 323-825-5045. You can also Skype in Fade to Black 14. No, they're not trying to steal my discovery. We're talking about doing this together, Brad. Okay? Just came in a tweet. 323-825-5045, and we'll give away some Watchers DVDs. Okay, while we're waiting for the phone calls to come in, one of the things that struck me, and I didn't know about this, was when you guys were down there talking to Jaime Maussan, and he brought in that ball that I don't even know how to describe it. That's evidence that came from the sky. How many feet across was it? Would you say maybe 2 feet, 24 inches, a 2-foot metallic ball?
Yeah, I would say it's about 2 feet wide, and the metal was quite thick. I mean, it must have been at least 3/8 of an inch thick, and the thing was heavy.
What do
Probably
you think
weighed 35 pounds, I would guess.
Yeah, it was huge, and it had like a blast hole out of the side. How would you describe that? A drone? I mean, what would the purpose of something like that even be?
Well, Steve Colburn, who was the scientist for ANS Research, worked with Roger Lear, believed that maybe it was one of those orbs that seemed to be seen over Mexico coming out of these ships, which we, because of Jaime's kindness, gave us the footage of this thing, which was really quite amazing, with these ships being expelled out of the ends of a larger craft that looked kind of like one of those balls. And there were more than there was more than one person filming it as it was happening. So if you looked at it towards the sun, the little balls looked dark, and if you looked at the other camera shot, they looked white because they were reflecting light. However, there's also the idea that this could be a hydrazine tank that had come off of some satellite that was in orbit. That's also a distinct possibility. So, I mean, we just don't know. After studying hydrazine tanks and how they're made, they coat them with sort of a fiberglass coating, which I'm not quite sure what that's for. Maybe it's to keep them from bursting in space. But it's what these satellites use as rocket fuel, which is probably what they're used when they're retasked and moved around in orbit. They have to shoot a jet of this stuff out. And hydrazine is pretty much the same kind of stuff that they use in airbags. So it could be that, and that would lend some credence to why it came down with such explosive force. But we just don't know.
Well, why wouldn't a government come forward, whether it's NASA or Russia or China or whoever else has got satellites up there?
Well, NASA did come in after it fell. Apparently, they're tracking everything that comes down, and wanted it back, and Jaime wouldn't give it to them. It was found by a farmer and given to Jaime, and people bring him stuff all the time. I mean, we saw some stuff there that we can't really talk about that was brought to him that's just unbelievably amazing. And he gets this stuff coming to him all the time. He has a huge audience of about 3 million viewers, and he's been doing this show for 20 years. So, you know, he's the guy. He's the point guy. I mean, if you lost your suitcase in the airport there in Mexico City, and it had Jaime Maussan, and it would end up in his office. Everybody knows where he is, how to find him. You know, so.
But my point is, why wouldn't the government come forward and say, "Look, this fell off a satellite"?
I don't know why they wouldn't say, but you know how tight-lipped NASA always is. Never.
Yeah, I kind of expected that, and you know, here's the blueprint. Here's the tank. This is what it is. It doesn't look like it had fallen off of. It doesn't look like something from a jet. It's a ball. And
I in Watcher 7, I put some diagrams from the Aeronautical Space Association with various hydrazine tanks that are used, on space vehicles, and this thing looked pretty similar to one of those, but we can't say conclusively that's what it was.
Okay, a couple of questions that have come in. Well, no, actually, it's about 20. Everybody wants to know LA's thoughts on Nibiru.
Well, I've always been a huge Nibiru skeptic. We interviewed several people about it, and one person, I won't mention his name, was so sure it was going to happen in 2012, and Nibiru is going to come, and it's going to change everything in the world as we know it, and blah blah blah. And look, this is what. Hear what I'm saying. Hear my heart here, okay?
Okay.
We can talk about this stuff. What's really happening right under our noses is the prophecies that were written thousands of years ago. And I'm not trying to dodge the question. We can talk about Nibiru. We've heard about it, and I get it. In the meantime, wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines, and pestilence, it's all happening right in front of our noses. The prophecies that we're told to look for, or the signs that we're told to look for, are happening on a global level. The fish and animal die-offs, the record colds, the record droughts, the record temperatures, okay? The honeybees die off. The wars, which are constantly plaguing the planet, the tumultuousness of the Middle East that we see, the volcanic activity, which now we've got Bardarbunga, which is a super volcano. We've got Yellowstone, which is a super volcano. A volcano in Japan just blew. We've got a series of earthquakes where now the 7.0, which let's say 20 years ago was, whoa, 7.0, is basically the norm. The 9.0 now, which devastated Fukushima and the Fukushima prefecture several years ago, that was not unprecedented, but that was a big one. And preceding that, of course, was the Haitian earthquake. The problem is reactor 4 in Fukushima has not been contained. The stuff is still leaking. And, well, don't worry about that, but just don't eat the sushi, folks. The Ring of Fire, which is constantly throwing these incredible earthquakes around and around and around she goes. And they go from Alaska down the west coast of North, Central, and South America. It swings out to Vanuatu, an island which is plagued by earthquakes, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and back up around the Aleutians to Alaska. It's called the Ring of Fire, very, very unstable. So we look at all this stuff. We look at the rise of ISIL. We look at the rise of radical Islam. We understand that the global phenomenon of the Arab Spring happened because one man couldn't pay or couldn't feed his family because of rising food prices. We are looking at California, major drought, which again is going to affect the food. The bee die-off affecting the food. The record floods in the Midwest affecting the food. Meat is at all-time high prices. I mean, it's all happening right under our stinking noses if we know what to look for. And when taken all together, and I've just painted a very serious, sobering picture of where the globe is and what's happening on a global level, it's not going away. It's not getting better, in my opinion. And we are headed towards some sort of a climax. All of this was written thousands of years ago and is now coming to life.
So are you saying then that Nibiru is real, is what you're saying? If everything else is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm suggesting that the place to watch is not for this. Oh, look, we're also told one of the prophecies that there'll be signs in the heavens. We're told that in Earth. So I'm expecting comets, close flybys, all sorts of weird stuff to happen. I'm expecting that, but that's only one of the signs. When we look at all the things, and I just sort of gave you a quick overview of where the planet is at right now. We are, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, we're on overdrive. This thing is heating up like I've never seen it, and I've been following this stuff for 34 years. I mean, this is really, it's heating up. It's right in front of our noses. And, more people, look, I was at some place in the Midwest last week, okay, undisclosed location, on assignment, looking at artifacts and doing all this stuff. And we would go to these different restaurants and eat every night. And most people that I heard, the conversation was about sports. Their team, what's going on. It's like medication. People are like, they can rattle off baseball scores and who's going to be the pennant and this football team and all this stuff. And it's like, look, sports are great. I get it. It's fine. But in the meantime, let's look around at what's going on here. I mean, if the Eyjafjallajökull volcano, which blew a couple of years ago, it closed the airspace over northern Europe for about 2 weeks, resulting in billions of dollars in economic loss for the airlines. Well, if Yellowstone goes, that's a super volcano. If the Bartabunga goes, which is in Iceland, that's a super volcano. That's a game changer. That's like Krakatoa, 150 years ago when that thing blew. In Indonesia, you could hear it in San Francisco. That's how loud it was. It covered the world in an ash cloud, and crops didn't grow. Well, the population wasn't what we have today. Population was a whole lot less, and we didn't have modernity that we have today. We didn't have all these devices. We're not hooked up. 150 years ago, there was no electricity, no plumbing, no nothing, no cars. None of this stuff exists. Now it's all here. I mean, God forbid there should be an electromagnetic pulse weapon, an EMP. I mean, that's a total game changer when it wipes out the grid. And that is a real threat to the United States. Our grid is incredibly vulnerable. And all a terrorist has to do is just get a nuke, let that thing blow it up 200 miles over the heartland, and that's it. The shockwave goes out, and life as we know it, it's over. Millions would die in the first 6 months. If it happened in the winter, they die within a month because everything shuts down.
Yeah, we're lucky. We're so every single day I think about that we are so lucky. Say hi to Dino. Dino, welcome to the program.
Hello everybody. Hello, Jimmy. Hello, LA. I have a little to offer on this subject. I mean, you've cataloged LA, a lot of things that are happening now that I acknowledge, and some appear to be getting worse. I guess all I can say is that I was what I thought was a good Catholic until I was about 17 and I started having sex. And I am very respectful of women, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I started to realize that there were, for me, a lot of fallacies in the Catholic religion, so I have not followed it since. So as far as, prophecies or this or that, all I can say is we got to keep on going on. We got to keep on keeping on, keep on being vigilant. Whether you believe a prophecy or not can freeze you up. And if you get afraid of everything, you stop thinking. And if you stop thinking, you stop trying. And that's all I can add to that.
Thank you, Dino.
I do have two things, though, real quick.
Okay.
I hope that in the future we will look more into Nikola Tesla, because a lot of things that may be happening now may be related to black tech. And I'd like to have someone that knew more about Tesla. I just finished a biography. And the second topic, which we haven't had time for, maybe later in the week, I have just investigated the Internet Archive, which happens to be in San Francisco, the main headquarters, and I think we need to discuss that some evening.
Okay. Thank you, Dino.
All right. Thank you for listening.
All the best. The point that he was making, and I think we
could get into weather modification.
Well, but also if we sit and ponder and worry about prophecies, then we don't move forward and we stop what we're doing and expect something and don't change our lives because we're too dependent on what potentially could happen that we don't have any control over. L.A.? L.A., are you there?
I am. I'm talking my mute button again. Sorry,
guys. Man. I'm just like...
we lost you.
I'm here, though, right?
Yeah. Now you're back.
All right. I'm eating pistachios. How totally rude and unprofessional. Thank you. But listen, the prophecy says, when you see these things, what things? Wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times. Okay, that's what it says. Those are a list of things we're to look for. Then it says, look up. It doesn't say build a bomb shelter or cower in the corner in fear. It says look up and know, I'm paraphrasing here, and know that your redemption is coming. That's what it says. That's what it tells us to do. In other words, I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at it, and this is where, with all due respect to Dino, I have a much, much broader, in my opinion, sense of what's happening. We are witnessing a cosmic war, the end of a cosmic war, which has raged in an unseen dimension, literally for millennia, and is now beginning to spill out in what I would consider these last days on planet Earth. And we're watching it happen. And I am excited by that, because the God of this world, the prince of this world, who is incredibly malevolent and evil, is about to be overthrown. And we know that. That's going to happen. This system that the world has been enslaved under is about to come to a crashing halt in the not too distant future. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. I'm not a date setter. But we're rapidly moving to the time where finally the big paradigm shift's going to happen. And I can't wait for that, because life as we know it will change forever, and change in a way that we can't even imagine.
Let's take another call. Hi, you're live with Rick Shaw and L.A. Marzulli. Who's calling?
My name is Yvonne in Tennessee.
What was your name again?
Yvonne.
Hi, Yvonne. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm a first-time caller.
Yes, you are. We'll get you some DVDs here.
Great.
Okay, Yvonne, go ahead. Go ahead with your question.
Jimmy, first I want to thank you for having L.A. and Rick on your program. I have watched them on Prophecy in the News, and they are right in line with what I'm thinking and feeling is happening spiritually and on our planet right now.
Thank you for that. But it's what this show is about. It's about teaching, learning, discovery, and hanging out and having a conversation. So thank you for that, though. Okay, question for L.A. or Rick.
No, not a question. Just thank you so much for being there.
Oh, okay.
And
Well, that
continue to do what you're doing, and I would love to have DVD.
okay. This is what you want to do right now. I've got your name written down. Just send Rita an email, Rita@jimmychurchradio.com, and send us your address. We'll get you those DVDs out.
I sure will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Bye-bye.
With all of the evidence that, and I'll throw this out to both of you, but with all of the evidence that is out there for visitation, what's the strongest? I throw this question out to every guest. If you're in court, right, you're in federal court, and you've got one crack at it, you're F. Lee Bailey, what's the evidence that you bring forward, that one piece?
Rick?
Well, as you know, Jimmy, I've been working on this other documentary about the Torah codes, and pretty much everybody has the...
Okay, I just brought in a caller. Turn down your radio or I'm going to hang up.
Sorry, Jimmy. Is that better?
Okay. Who's calling?
Hey, it's Jonas. How are you?
Hey, Jonas. Okay, really quick because we're out of time, and Rick was right in the middle of an answer. What question do you have for the guys?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm so sorry. I was just curious if LA might have considered this rise in prophetic activity might just be a rise in global communication. I mean, now we're in a state where we can actually learn about what's going on halfway across the globe, whereas when this was all written, you know, people didn't know what was going on, you know, the next town over until a horse or camel or whatever the animal may be carried a person over. And I'll take my answer off there. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Hey, that's a great question, Jonas. Thank you, sir.
Take care.
That's a great question, L.A.
Absolutely. And he makes a good point. The problem is that even in modernity, you go back 20, 30, 40 years, go back before Israel becomes a nation, and the prophetic clock starts ticking with the rebirth of Israel. That starts the clock ticking. And that happens in 1949. Everything changes. And, okay, it didn't happen quickly. It's happening slowly. They're called the birth pangs. And that scripture is related. It's like a woman in having birth. And they come slowly, and then they become faster and faster. Look, now we've got Ebola to worry about. I painted a picture, and you're right. Because of the telecommunications, now we know when an earthquake happens in Fukushima, I know about it. My iPhone pings. I get it. So he's right in one respect that we see these things. We can keep track of these things. But look at the record. Look at the temperature records, which have been broken just in the last year. Look at the plethora of dead animals, fish, and bird die-offs. Look at the bee population die-off. As far as I know, that's unprecedented.
Well, like what I was about to say a minute ago, which kind of fortifies some of the things that LA was talking about, is that never have I seen all of these professors and rabbis that I've been working with on the Torah Code project where they talk almost entirely about the return of the Messiah. Now these guys are Jews. They believe in, they're steeped in Judaic law. Some are Orthodox rabbis, and others are not, but they're all basically living that life. They're eating kosher foods. They're in Israel, and they feel close to what's going on. And all of these Torah codes that are coming out now, every other one of them has something to do with the Messiah. And they know that they can't peg it to any date because that would be like, you're not supposed to do that. But nevertheless, what's coming out of the Torah from a computer standpoint right now is really quite phenomenal.
Can it be coincidence? You know, the famous comparison. You could take Moby Dick and apply the Torah code to it and get the same information.
Right. And we know that. If you have enough, like Professor Harrelip calls it, a text population. In other words, if you have a book with enough letters in it, yeah, you can cause a computer to search it and find keywords and create a table with it. But the problem with that theory is that rarely does it end up in a table where all of the letters are almost touching or overlapping in close proximity to each other like they do in the Torah text? I mean, it just, people will see that in this film because we did a comparison. We took what they call monkey texts, which are basically random Hebrew texts, and they did the same tables, looked it up in several different ones. And yeah, they found the words in there, but they were totally insignificant from a probability standpoint. They were meaningless because the other books had thousands of characters between words, and they were spread all over the page, where the Torah text, it ended up, in one case, being the whole entire table ended up in one chapter of the book of Numbers. I mean, it was like it was planned that way. So something really phenomenal is going on inside of the Torah text. And as far as the timing of events, we wouldn't know about this unless we had computers. And this has only been, when the first guy really showed his research on a computer was in 1976, and he showed it to Professor Eliyahu Rips, and that was like the first test. And so in the early 80s, they started actually doing like part of the book of Genesis in the Torah in like an Apple II computer, because that's all that basically was available back then.
Right.
And so I asked him, I said, well, how did you guys do that? There weren't any Hebrew fonts. He said they assigned each letter, each glyph, the Hebrew font, a number. And then they fed the numbers into the computer. And I said, oh, that's just unbelievably complicated. He said, no, it was quite simple, actually. Of course, this is like a world-class mathematician I'm talking to.
Sure.
But that's how they did it, and they kept finding things that they didn't expect to find. Later, when computers became better and more powerful, and you could actually put an entire Torah into the computer, they came up with these what looks like crossword puzzles where words actually intersect and all that. And what's coming out of there is just unbelievable.
When you first started your research into the Torah codes, did you go in objective and then come out feeling another way, or is this just a presentation of the evidence?
Well, I've been at it for a long time. I first found out about it by reading Michael Drosnin's book called The Bible Codes, and that was back in 1998 when his book came out, like the year before, and he was on some morning talk show. And well, that sounds really interesting. So I bought the book, and I was flying from Atlanta to Los Angeles in those days, and read it on the plane, and thought, well, I'll never meet these guys. They're all in Jerusalem. I can't ask them any questions. And through a total fluke, a friend of mine ended up sitting next to Professor Haralick on a plane bound for New York, and tosses him his cell phone when they land in LaGuardia, and I'm connected to the world experts just like that. It was very, very weird. And that was in 2006. So we've been communicating with each other on a personal and ongoing basis all of this time, and I've seen the kind of evolution of the codes and what they're doing now. And what Professor Haralick is doing is working on codes that are basically 3D, or what he'd call 2.5D. You'd have actual Z-axis codes coming towards the camera or away from you. It's very complicated stuff. I mean, that these guys are doing. The math involved is really incredible.
But did you go in objective and come out another way?
That's a good question. I mean, I had times where I really doubted that this was really going on, especially when we did some experiments on the year 2012. We did some tables about 2012, and this is back 6 years before 2012. I asked the rabbis, well, what does the Torah code say about 2012? Because I figured, everybody's calling it the end of the world. What we ended up discovering was that the Torah codes are not supposed to be used as a predictive tool, but yet sometimes they do that. And we don't know when it's doing it and when it's not doing it, because this is really advanced technology.
I'm just
what it also may be doing is basically echoing the zeitgeist of the times. What's in the newspapers,
Sure,
what's in
sure.
our internet.
Right.
It's copying that information, and you can pull it out of the Torah codes.
Right. Yeah, I'm uneasy with it. I almost don't want it to be real. I'm being straight up. That's just I'm very uncomfortable with it. It's one of those phenomena where if it's real, and it's feeling more and more like there's something there to me. I read the Bible codes when it first came out.
Yeah,
and I was uneasy with it, as with anything that is, paranormal like that. If it turns out to be real, if the thing that you're seeing in your house really is the ghost of your grandmother, do you really want to know?
Well, here's a great example. Here's something that actually happened. Remember, when was it? 2012, when there was Comet Elenin, and everybody was talking about it. You remember that, Jimmy, right?
Yes.
And everybody said that's going to sweep by the Earth, and it's got the tail and ejecta the size of Jupiter. It's going to cause like 3 days of darkness, yada, yada, yada. We kept hearing this. Then one day I had my car radio on, and was running down the street, and they said, it appears that Comet Elenin is breaking up. It's passed too close to the sun. Well, I remembered some table that I had read in Drosnin's first book. I run home and I open it up, and I think it was page 134. There was a table that said, in 5772, which is 2012, and it said comet, and then it said on another line, I will break it in pieces.
No.
It did. So I immediately scanned that page, and I sent it to my rabbi and professor friends in Israel. I said, check this out for me, please. And so Rabbi Glazerson and Dr. Rotenberg started working on it and did their own table on Comet Elenin. Said the same stuff. It gives me kind of chills just telling you this. But down in the lower left-hand corner, there was a phrase all in one line, and it said, in the end of days.
Yeah, see, do you really want to know that? L.A., are you with me? Do you really want to know?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I'm a frank supernaturalist, and I believe that the Torah codes give us an indication that whoever, and of course I have definitive answers to the whoever is, but whoever penned that book, it's just unbelievable. Not only are there prophetic messages all the way through it, as Chuck Missler calls it, it's an integrated message system for us, for anyone who wants to read it. But as Rick points out, and that's what's so fascinating about the Torah Code film, that you get these messages that are there that just shouldn't be there. I mean, there's just, you talked about Moby Dick. Well, you can find anything in a 1,000-letter, ELS or whatever, where they skip over 1,000 letters to the next one. These are all very tight. I mean, very, very tight tables, a lot of them. And that just, and then sometimes they'll be right over the plain text. It's like, whoa, you find the table within a story in the Bible that's talking about the very thing that you're looking for. It's like, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
So they're unbelievable. They're just
there's the
incredible.
plain test example. A great one is, remember when BP had the oil leaking in the Gulf, the oil well. There's a table that says oil well in the USA, gives the date, and all of these codes were found over the plain text scripture that says, and the fountains of the deep were broken up.
Yeah,
I'm with you. Like I said, I don't want to know. Hey guys, thank you. We've got a lot of stuff that the three of us are going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks, but thank you for coming on tonight. It was all that and more. And I feel, once again, 2.5 hours wasn't enough. Thank you for hanging out for an extra 25 minutes. And we've got to continue this very, very, very soon and pick up where we left off.
Can't wait. Would love to do it.
Thank you, L.A. Thank you, Rick.
Jimmy.
You guys have a great night. I'll be in touch with the both of you tomorrow. Have a great night.
All right. Take care.
L.A. Marzulli, Rick Shaw, The Watchers. and I'm going to say this: we're winding down. Went right up to it. Those DVDs are some of the most amazing. And again, I need to drive this home with everybody when we're talking about these two guys. They go places. They go. They touch. They investigate. They research. They test. They talk. They interview. And for me, when they're just, I've Watchers 6, 7, and 8. Tomorrow night, LA will be on with Dr. J, and they'll be discussing Watchers 8. I've watched them over and over again. It's what a documentary needs to be. So again, thank you. And I want to say this: when LA is a God-fearing man. He can quote any part of the Bible to you. He is an investigator of ufology and research and the Nephilim and the connections and things that greatly contradict what most religions believe. He combines the both of them, and I commend him on that. I don't know how he can do it. And like I said last week, I watched him speak to a very large congregation, thousands. And for him to be able to sit there and do that and combine both sides of the research together, it's impossible. You can't do it. He does. L.A., again, he's my guy. L.A., I've been wanting to talk to him for such a long time. And again, thank you. Oh, tomorrow night, Thomas Reed. I got to say thank you. Thank you, L.A. Thank you, Rick. Thank you to everybody that called in tonight. Coming up next, The Unexplained. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Shows produced by executive producer Rita Kamarian. Shows produced by Hilton J. Paul, Mark D. Kovar. And, of course, Leslie S. Johnson III. Fady is by Dale Romero. Graphics by Method of Signaling. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Music is this guy, Doug Aldrich. Intro is by Spaceboy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. Thank you to everybody listening tonight and all around the world across the United States. Tomorrow night, Thomas Reed and the Reed Family UFO Extraordinary Show. I am out of here. See you tomorrow night, everybody. Be safe.